Hello, good evening, all parents and students. I'm teacher Weilun here, the academic director at MyStretcher. Tonight, we will be having our webinar on JC pathways after the O levels, right? So, as all of you would know, you all have all actually just gotten your O level results, and right now, actually, is the 6 days leading up to the Monday where you have to submit your school choices, in terms of be it polytechnic and also junior colleges or Institute of Technical Education. So what we have done is actually yesterday night, for those of you who managed to attend, we actually did an overview session, right? Looking at some of the key things to expect after the O levels. What are some of the things to take note as part of the JAE? We also recognize that some students may have more specific questions when it comes to, like, for example, the JC track specifically and also the Polytechnic track. So that's why we also have two more of these webinars, where tonight we'll focus more on the JC track, and then tomorrow we will have one in the morning on the Polytechnic track. So later on, Alvin, our co-founder of MyStretcher, will also be in shortly, and he will also be here to take any questions that any one of you have. So for tonight's session, what will happen is, for a start, we will go through some of the key information, key things to note when it comes to like the JC pathway, right? That's the first part. Thereafter, right, so anytime that you all have any questions, feel free to also put it in the chat, and we'll be happy to take it from there, right? So we can have the session to be more interactive. So anytime that you all have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll be happy to help to address that along the way too. Okay. So with that, let me now share my screen. Okay. And then we can start the session proper, right? So you all should be able to see the slides now. Okay. Okay, so for tonight, right, so as mentioned, we will be specifically focusing more on the JC pathways. There's a few key things that we just wanted to highlight for a start, right? So number one, the JC admission criteria, I think that one I will go through fairly quickly because that's something that I think more all of you should be aware of already. But what I do want to go into a little bit of detail is really in terms of the difference in the tracks, right? So what's the difference between, say, a A-level track and the IB track when you look at the JC? And also some of the considerations when it comes to choosing of the subject combinations in school, right? In terms of the art and the science stream. And then finally, what it means in terms of the implications for tertiary pathways. So some of you may be aware, actually, right now, there are also some adjustments in terms of the university admission score, right? The UAS, or the what we previously known as the rank points. So the rank points for university, there's some adjustment to that as well. So it actually does affect in terms of, the subjects that you are taking in JC, the amount of effort that you have to put into them, and so forth too. Okay, so later on we'll touch a bit on that too. Okay, so with that, right? So this part here, just as a recap, in case there are people who didn't come yesterday, right? So the JAE application has officially opened, right? And you will be all the way till Monday. So do take note of the timeline, and don't forget to put in your submissions of your school and course choices before that, right? So that's the first portion. And this is the timeline, right? So just for everybody's knowledge, right? So just remember, after you have submitted, what happens next is that, the posting results are released on 3rd Feb. And thereafter, so if you do get admitted to JC or MI, you will actually report to school the next working day after the release of the results, right? So on 4th February, actually, that's where you will actually report to school already, right? And here, in terms of the today session, we'll be focusing more on that first pillar, right? So specifically with regards to the JC and the MI. For those of you who want to know a bit more about Polytechnic, we will have a session tomorrow morning, right? So tomorrow morning, if you want to have some specific deep dives on Polytechnic, then we will do it. Okay, but for tonight, we'll focus more on the JC pathways. Okay. And here, so I think this is something that all of you should be aware, because as part of your form that you gotten, you will actually recognize the calculation there. So that's not something that you need to calculate for now in terms of the L1, R5. The thing to note here is this part probably is something that's just useful to know for those of you who fall into this category, right? So in case you're wondering about that, there will be a group of you, for example, that perhaps, in terms of the, scores for JC, you meet it in terms of the net score, but it may be the case that you fall short in terms of some of the subject-based requirement. So what I mean by that is, if you look at this, I think usually what happens here is, sometimes the one that usually trips people up is the English part. So it may be the case that, your other subjects are fine, but the English portion actually you trip up and maybe you didn't get a C6, you got a D7. So that creates a issue where you don't really meet the subject grade requirement. So when you go to JC, actually there are two sets of requirement, right? One is the net score. So what is your net score where you take your L1 R5 minus the bonus score? That determines whether you can get into the school. Secondly, there's also subject-based requirement. So sometimes there are some students who can meet the cutoff, but they cannot meet these subject-specific requirements. And sometimes you may wonder what happens from there. So perhaps just to clarify a bit on that, in this case, so if you do fall under such a category, what's going to happen is that there is this idea of what we call as a conditional admission, right? A conditional admission. And how the conditional admission works essentially is, if you say you do not meet the subject requirements, you can still go into the school provided you meet one of two criteria. So that means either your L1 R5 was 15 or less, or it's between 16 and 20, and you will get for the five relevant subjects A1 and A2. So that will allow you to go into the school on a conditional basis. In case you're wondering, so let's say if I do get in on a conditional basis, then what happens? Are there any conditions? So generally there are conditions. So that means if you do get in on this conditional basis, what's going to happen is that at the end of J1, right? At the end of J1 in JC1, right? You will be expected to take the same paper that you missed the grade for. So let's say, for example, for English, you got D7, you will be expected to take that again at the end of J1, right? So together with the next O-level batch, right? And you must meet the grade, right? That means you must be C6 and better. So if you take and you don't get that grade that is needed, what's going to happen is that then you have to leave the JC, and in year two, you will have to go to Millennia Institute. Okay, but in Millennia Institute, what happens is that you get another chance, right? So in year two, you get another chance. You will get to take that English exam again, right? So the one that you missed, right, in terms of the grade. And let's say, for example, again, you missed the grade, right? Touch wood, but let's say, for example, you missed the grade again, then that will be the worst case scenario where you then have to leave MI. And usually what happens, in case you're wondering, for some of you in that category, what usually happens is that then they may leave to go to Polytechnic, right? And there are also some people, so this is one group, right? So there are some people who are like that, where they go in via conditional admission, they don't meet the conditions, and they don't meet these subsequent requirements in terms of the grade for the test, then they have to leave. There are also some others. So I think yesterday we also provided some stats, right? Where there are some students who feel that, maybe they go to JC in J1 and feel that it's not something that quite work out for them. They may actually decide, they want to go to poly. It's possible also. So there is that possibility of that, right? So there are people who do although it's not common, so it's not the norm. So the way to think about it is it's not the norm, but there are indeed people who, after they go on the JC path, they may feel that it's not quite what they feel is the right one for them. So they request for a transfer, and then they may go to a polytechnic route. So that's the first one. The second one is there also can be cases whereby, in case you're wondering, let's say if you don't make it to JC and you go to poly, is there a possibility of then transferring to JC? And that one, again, is not the norm, but there has been cases where that's done before. So in the first year of poly, what's going to happen if you fall under that category, like you have a bit of doubt whether you can make it in, you're not that certain. So there are cases whereby people go to poly, then after the first year of poly, what they do is they go through the JAE again, right? So what they do is that based on the results that they have, they go through the JAE exercise, but it will be the year after lor. So instead of 2026, it will be the 2027 exercise. And based on that 2027 exercise, they will try to get into JC again, right? So there is the possibility of that. But you recognize that for that case, it also depends on yourself, right? So it also depends on whether you feel the JC route or the polytechnic route is something that is, more suitable for all of you. And maybe for that, I also want to take the chance now, because I didn't really mention that just now. So for all of you here I think it's about putting things in perspective also, because ultimately, indeed, you have passed quite a critical milestone, but it's going to be one of many more milestones to come, right, along this journey. And like what we said also, right? So regardless of the grade that you got at this time, right, in secondary school, there are still several hoops that you can go through. So it's not the end yet, right? So the idea here is that you see, be it whether you're going through a JC route or be it whether you're going through a poly route, there are avenues and opportunities for you to go to different places, including to university, including to the industry, to different jobs. So I think that, it's nothing is really closed off for now. But the idea is that think of it as one milestone, right, among several that you have to go through. And the important mindset to have here is that at each of these milestones, go with the best information that you have, right? So make a well-informed decision, make a decision that you won't regret, that you won't want to lock yourself into, right? So, for example, if I give you an example, I have seen some students, for instance, right? So they are struggling quite a bit. So when they pass, like for example, O levels, they were always struggling. Like for example, they struggle in English, they struggle at additional mathematics. They didn't really do well for them. But by the thinness of hair breadth, they managed to get into JC, right? And they said they do want to go to JC, right? And they realized that when they go in, for some of them who didn't have that foundation, they struggle a lot more because they realize actually right now in terms of the step up in the academic requirements is a lot higher, right? So I think I've mentioned before the analogy. If let's say your like chemistry at secondary four is like a difficulty level five, I would say the difficulty level for chemistry at JC will be like a 8 or a 9, right? So it will be quite a big step up. And you only have if you're not going to MI, which is a 3-year program, the JC program will be a 2-year program, right? So it's pretty intense, right? And there are students who eventually find that they can't really cope and they realize that perhaps that academic rigor is not something that they was quite suitable for them, right? So on hindsight, for some of them, actually they realized actually maybe if they had gone to polytechnic, had more of a hands-on, more of an industry specific domain knowledge kind of a learning, that was something that worked out better for them. So I think it's really different stroke for different folks, and I think it's really understanding what is the best fit for you. So in that sense, and I think that's something that we also shared yesterday, is that it's really what you make the most of, right, in terms of your time in the school, right? So I would say at this point in time, there isn't really a place that is definitively good or definitively bad in that sense, right? And it's really how you think about the fit, how you think about what you make in terms of your opportunity there, right? So that's also the other thing to highlight. Okay. Yeah. But coming back to this, so like what I mentioned, so indeed, right? So if you go on a certain pathway, like what I said, it's possible to cross, right? But it's not the norm, right? And if you were wondering about that, so there are people who, if they go to poly, there's that, but it's not the norm, right? It's not something that is as common. Okay. So that's the thing to note. Then going on, right? So this one I won't go through in detail because this one you all would know already, right? So what is the L1, R5? How is it calculated? How do we minus the bonus point to get the net score? Okay. Then what I will go on directly is the MI1, right? So MI1, I think for the benefit of those of you who weren't around yesterday, in case you're wondering about what's the difference between MI and JC, the way to think about it. So for some of you, maybe you're wondering, okay, so actually I'm right hovering there. And from where I am, actually, I may not be able to go to some of these JCs that I want, but perhaps I can qualify for MI. But then there's that thought is, should I then go to MI or do I feel that, going on a polytechnic route could be better, right? So in truth, the question here is the MI route essentially covers the same curriculum as JC. So you can think of it as it's actually giving you the same materials, the same curriculum for you to eventually take the A levels, right? So it's essentially that. The key difference is just that instead of a 2-year horizon, it's now split over 3 years. So JC, like I said, is only 2 years. 2 years is actually very tight. So for many students, myself included, actually, I find it is very tight. So you go in, right? So usually how it works is like that. So you go to JC, the first few months is more like adapting, right? So, and chances are, after a big exam, you will go in with quite a honeymoon mindset, right? That, oh, is can take things chill a bit, adapt a bit. That's usually the mindset that a lot of people have when they go in. But you realize that once that happens, right? So more or less actually half the year can be consumed and you may not even realize it, right? Then it's already half a year is gone. And you realize that, oh, you have not really been keeping up with your lectures, you have been falling behind a bit, and then you realize you have to do a lot of catch up. And by then, it's first year is done and it's promos, right? It's the promotional exams. Then you realize you really struggle. So it's very common actually for the students here, as if you go to JC, it's very common that in the first year for promotional exams, a lot of people do very, very badly, right? So that's to give you a perspective, right? So myself, I did quite well in O levels, right? So quite a number of A1s, but my promo exams actually was like BBC, that kind of grade, for J1, end of J1. So you can think of it as essentially, it's quite common, right? So it's not uncommon. So the idea here is that why do I highlight this example is it really depends on number one, if as you go in, right? You must have that accountability, you must have that discipline, right? And 2 years fly by very fast. For a lot of people, actually, before they realize it, 2 years is up and they have to take A levels really. And some people really struggle all the way to the end. Like there will be people literally who all the way until the prelim exams, they are still failing, right? Their score is like ungraded. But somehow, right, one way or another, they try their best and by some miracle, they manage to clear the A levels. So it's a bit different from like the Sec 4, right, in terms of the step up. So why I emphasize that is again, that is what you must ask yourself. Is that something that you are prepared to manage? Lah? And I think for many of you here who have the scores to make it to JC, I think there is a certain level of rigor, right, in terms of your ability to manage the academic load and everything. So I don't think that's an issue. But I think more targeted towards those on the margins, on the border. I think that's where then you have to seriously ask yourself, right, whether that is where you can manage. And if not, then one other option is MI, because Millennium Institute actually is a 3-year program, right? So you don't need to finish in 2 years, you can do it in three, right? And three actually gives people a longer runway to manage, is a lot more manageable also. But at least you're still doing curriculum that is going towards the A-level track, right? So that's the key difference. The other key difference is MI, they offers a business slash commerce stream that you won't see in JC. So business commerce, actually you will see like courses relating to finance, all that kind of thing that you don't really see as part of the JC curriculum. The only other place that you see is Polytechnic, right? So Polytechnic under certain clusters they will have for the accounting tracks and all that business tracks, they have that there. But in JC track you usually don't see, right? The only place you will see it is MI. So these are the two main considerations for those of you who are wondering between JC and MI. That would be one of the consideration too, right? So whether it's manageable for you, right, in terms of 2 year versus 3 years, and also in terms of the stream and the kind of programs that you would like to be offered, right? So that's the other thing. So here, okay, so there was some, I think, like the last session that we did, I think there were some questions with regards to choice of schools and everything. So later on, I will share again, like for the benefit of everybody, this tool that we developed here at MyStretcher, that we find is useful because if you look at it right now in terms of the MOE School Finder, so if you go to the MOE School Finder webpage, on MOE webpage itself, you will realize that the information is more decentralized, right? So that means you click on Raffles or if you click on say Nanyang Junior College, you will see only for that particular page, right? The school and the cutoff, right? But you don't really see, number one, a consolidated view, right, of the different schools, and you don't really have the past year's data to fall back on, right? You can only see for the last year. So what we have done here is that we have consolidated that together. And I'll put that in the link later, and I'll run through with you also on how that works, right? And actually how you can also use that as a way to look at the schools and all that as well. But before that, actually, if you look at this here, the key focus, right, the key approach here, as you all are still looking through, I think hopefully by now you all have already a draft, a sense of the 12 schools slash programs that you are looking at. But if you are still thinking over that, a good way to do it actually is number one, what I would think about is first casting the net wide first. That means you use the MOE school and course finder, go through all the schools, all the courses available, and see what are the ones that is aligned with your interests, with your style, with your fit, right? Then from there you narrow down. And once you narrow down, that's where then you can go onto the school's own websites and you can visit their open houses, and you can see whether they are a good fit or not. And maybe I'll show you all for the open houses. Actually, there's still a couple that's coming up. That quite a number is over already. But if you just look at it over the course of tomorrow, like there's a few Daman, NJ, ACS is also having an IB info session, right, early next week, to talk more about the IB program itself. So these are actually still, open houses that you can go down, you can check it out. And personally, I feel the good thing about open house is you get to go down, you get to see the students in action, you get to talk to the teachers, and it's also a good chance for you to really clarify some of the key things, and so what are some of the key things actually is, it's about things like subject combinations. Say, for example, do the schools offer that? And what would be needed for you to do well in those subjects in school in terms of the prerequisites and everything. And it's also a good way for you to understand better about the school's culture, right? So, quite a number have passed, but you can also just take note of those that are still, ongoing over the weekend, right? So, including like River Valley and also SJI also, right? So there's a number, but I think quite a number was also today lah. So hopefully you all managed to go for that, right? So with that, what I will do now is I will also show you all the link, to the web page, that I was talking about, and then I will use that as a way to also show you all, the key thing that I wanted to highlight just now. So give me a minute. Let me just toggle over to the screen. Yeah. Okay. So let me just put that in the chat also in terms of the link so that everybody can see. So this is the link, right? So y'all can, if I click through, y'all can actually see that here. And then y'all can also refer to that on your own time. And this is actually what I was talking about. So y'all should be able to see my screen now. This is the JC cutoff points, right? That we have consolidated. So if you look at this here, right? So how you use it actually is from this screen, you can actually see for the whole compilation of JCs. It's like a 10-year, right? All the way looking back from 2025 to 2015. The schools, right? And their cutoff points, both for the art stream and also for the science stream. So what is good here is that, then you don't need to slowly one by one click on like MOE website, to look at individual school. Plus here, you also get reference to the past year's data, right? So you also get reference to the past year's data. So a few things, so for the benefit of everybody, some key observations that you can already highlight from here, and some questions that we do often see from students, is that number one, you will realize, some of you may even wonder, right, for a start, how do we even determine all this to begin with, right? So maybe just to clarify for everybody's benefit, the cutoff point itself, you can think of it as is like the points of the very last student who made it into the school in the previous year, right? So all these points are not based on this year because this year has not passed, correct? These are all based on last year's exercise. That means your seniors, right, who made it into the school. And you can think of it as this is the cutoff point. This is the cutoff point for the school. And it was the net score of the very last student who made it into the school. So say, for example, in RI, right? So RI, the very last place, the very last vacancy, right? So this very last student who made it in, what was his score, right? So his score last year was 5. So therefore the cutoff is 5, right? Is it predictive of this year? I will say here to caveat, nobody has a crystal ball, right? So we wouldn't be able to tell, whether for sure it will be this. But what is helpful here is that you can see a few things, right? Which is generally, particularly if you look at the JCs, the poly itself, you'll see there's more variance. But for the JCs, actually, if you look at it from year to year, they are not going to be very significant variance. In fact, you can already see across all the schools, right? Just from year to year, at most is a plus minus one, right? So let's say last year was a 5, it will drift. If it drifts, it will be drifting one down or one up, right? So at most plus minus one. You very seldom, in fact, if you just look across here, that you will see a 2, and 3 is almost unheard of over here, right? But for polytechnic, poly courses is possible, right? So poly courses actually you can see more of a drift, more of a variance, but for JC not so much. So why do I mention that? Is because some of you may be wondering, right? So maybe, oh, I put down my choices, and maybe if I look at it now, oh, Hwa Chong is at a 5, but actually I'm at a 7, right? So is it worth a try? So I would say that, it's okay to have stretch choices, right? If you want to really try for a school, stretch choices meaning the cutoff of the school is actually lower compared to your net score, right? It's worth a try, but I would say that anything more than a plus minus a 1, may be too much of a stretch given this trend. You see, this is what I was trying to tell you, right? So because you don't really see a plus minus 2 variance, right? So given that, I would say is very, very low, if in fact, not much of a chance, right? So that's what I will also highlight from here. The other thing is you also realize most of the time, right? Generally in the last 5 years or so, the trend is also down. That means it's not getting easier to get in, it's getting harder, right? So generally you will see that, right? So you can see if they trend, year 7 to 6, then you have like, uh, in fact, for very interestingly, if you just look at the art stream itself, it's pretty stable, right? So from 2024 to 2025, a lot of them held pretty stable. And that's to be expected, actually. You will see generally there's not a lot of changes, right? Even in the score from year to year. And you can also see science stream, right? So science stream, you can see some of them deep down a bit. In fact, Raffles went down to 3, right? So 3, you can think of it is pretty mind-boggling, really. So literally, that means you are in a really great position with regards to your R1, R5, plus you have bonus points that you are deducting, right? So that's and usually so if you think of the minimum that you can go is 2 usually, right? Because if you look at a perfect score of a 6, you minus away your 2 bonus points for maybe affiliation or 2 bonus points for mother tongue or CCA, a max of 4, you get 2. So this is actually not too far away from the minimum really. So it's quite difficult, right? And generally you will see the science stream definitely will be more competitive, right? Because also note that the score here is a matter of like, demand and supply, right? So the more people who compete to get into the school, the more it will drive the points down. Yeah, so generally, more people want to go into the science stream and, a bit more competitive, right, compared to the art stream, right? So that's why you can see the score is also lower, right? But also you can see the same thing happening, right? So it's pretty stable from year to year. And even if they trend down, you can see in this case, is a -1 in making it harder actually over time, right? So that's the thing to note. Okay. So I think to put in view, I think again, just to caveat, it will be hard to second guess what will be the score this year, right? But I think what this can do is that it can give you an inkling, right, of how things have changed or not changed over the last couple of years. So the takeaway here is you can see it's pretty stable, right? It doesn't change much. And even if it change, is one score variance. So I think have that in perspective as you put down your schools also, in particular for the stretch. That means if you really want to put a stretch school, it's possible, but not something that is too far off, right? And definitely I would advise, have schools that are also in line with your current cutoff and definitely have backups also, right? So I think you may have heard also sometimes, even within schools that are aligned with the cutoff, there could be competition. So it's always good to have backups, right? So backups are these schools where essentially their cutoff is higher, right, as compared to your net score. So there's always something for you to fall back on. And my rule of thumb is generally, even though there's quite a number of choices that you can work with, right? 12 choices, try to maximize, utilize all of them, right? So that you won't run into a case whereby, so some people maybe they're overly confident, right? So they were like, okay, the first few choices, they're very confident, but somehow, they it's not they mess up, but the outcome was messed up for them. They didn't manage to get there. And it turns out that because they either didn't fill up the last few choices or they anyhow, right? It didn't work in their favor, right? They end up, not getting any schools that they can choose from, but they were just randomly allocated. So you don't want that to happen to you, right? So that's also the other thing just to take note from here. Okay, so I've sent you all the link. I think that's something that y'all can look at. And as you all look at this, it's a good way, number one, to map out, right, in terms of your choices of schools, how that will work. And number two, is a good way for you to see also which are the schools that are aligned with your current fit, your interest, and also, which are the ones that you feel, is something that you want to be part of your school listing. Okay, so that's the other thing here that I wanted to highlight for everybody. Okay, next, okay, so what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go on to go through a bit more. So I've talked about a few things now, right? So I've talked about the tool, right? In terms of the score trends and all. I have also talked about, things like the open house and also some of the conditional acceptance, right? The next one I wanted to cover a bit, which is something that does come up quite a bit because if you look at the schools, right, there are some schools that are on the international baccalaureate track and some that are on the A-level track. So there has always been questions about that. So maybe I will just touch a bit on that to highlight, the differences between the two. In case you're wondering, there are not that many schools that offer the IB, right? So there's ACS, there's SJI, But many schools are on the A-level track. In fact, if you look at the IB track, typically in Singapore, uh, is more offered amongst the international schools. So if you look at the international schools in Singapore, all of them are on IB, right? So none of them is on A-level track, but it's usually our local schools that offer the A-levels, right? And you may be wondering, so what's the difference between them? So I'll talk a bit about that. But first and foremost, I think what's important to note is that I wouldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other, right? So it's not true to say, oh, IB maybe not as good as A levels, right? Maybe not as rigorous. It's not really that. I think when it first started, right, when IB first started many years ago in Singapore, initially there was that concern, right, that of score dilution, that oh, maybe the exam is easier, so you get a diluted. Diluted means essentially inflation rather, not score dilution, score inflation. Yeah, you get the inflated score. People think that, even if you do well for IB, it's not rigorous. Yeah, it's not like that. So it has changed already, right? So in fact, it was never like that to begin with, right? But I think it was misrepresented. So in short, the takeaway is that IB, both in terms of its perception, both in terms of its offer coverage, is no less rigorous compared to the A levels, right? And is no less well regarded, right? In terms of its reputation, its legitimacy. So if you are thinking about, what is the implication if I take, like, say, IB versus like A levels, you do not need to worry if you come from a track record, if you come from a legitimacy angle, right? And it's also the case if you look at it in terms of some of you may be wondering, like maybe some of you here may be thinking about application to overseas universities or even application to some of the more competitive faculties in local universities. It also does not discriminate you. So for ourselves, we have worked with many people who have entered into some of these faculties, and we have gotten overseas scholarships. And in fact, there's a good mix, right? So there are people who took the A levels and go on to get good scholarships, and there are also people who took the IB exams and they go on to do the same, right? So there is no one better or worse in that sense, right? Then how do they differ, right? So how they differ actually is if I just give you a sense of the IB diploma, you can think of it as the IB diploma itself as a program. You can think of it as there's a core, right? And the core itself covers a few things. And on top of the core, there's these 6 subject groups by which the students can choose subjects from. And what are the core, right? So the core actually is made out of 3 key parts if you look at IB. And a few things to note. So creativity, activity and service is a lot like values in action. So the equivalent of it is a lot like the values in action that is done by our local students, right? Community service and everything is quite similar to that. So I would say it's like the equivalent of that. But what's the different one is really the extended essay. So if you look at it in terms of, maybe I'll touch a bit on the extended essay. It's really like a self-directed research paper that students have to do. And this one is very different. Because why? Because in A levels, you won't see something like that, right? So A levels, there is no such thing as a research paper where you have to identify a theme, a topic that you want to go into, and then you write a paper on that. I think for the parents here, you may be quite familiar, for those of you who have studied like for universities, right, where you have to write papers and everything, it's like that, right? So the whole idea behind that is IB wants to prepare students for uni, and one natural part of that is about research, is about, self-directed learning. So that's where the extended essay comes in, right? So this is not something that you see in A levels, but you can see it's there in IB. Uh, More focus of research, self-directed research, paper writing, etc. Right? So that's one key part. And then this one I mentioned is about the creative activity and service. But this one, I would say, in a sense, is quite similar to the community service values in action that JC does. Um, Another key thing is you can see then IB diploma, there's like 6 different subject groups of which students can choose from. That's the key difference also, because if you look at it, then in terms of the breadth of subjects that they have to take under the IB diploma is more. They take more, right? Compared to A-level track. A-level track, I will explain later, but A-level actually the students only take 4 main subjects, excluding GP. So you have to take general paper, but on top of general paper, then you're going to take 4 other subjects. And I'll also explain later, but even the 4 subjects, now MOE has deprioritized, in a sense, the exam coverage of one of them. So technically, the student only needs to focus on 3 out of the 4, right? But for IB, the breadth of subjects taken is more, right? There are more subjects that they have to take across these different categories. So you can think of it as each of these category, this is the broad subject category. Under each of the category, then there are specific subjects that they can pick. For example, under sciences, that's where you will see things like your bio, your chemistry, your physics. Under things like individuals and society, that's where you will see things like economics, you see things like psychology, you'll see things like business, right? Under mathematics, that's where, of course, as the name suggests, mathematics and so on. So that's where they will choose the subject right from there. And generally, if you look at it as a perfect IB score, is a perfect score of 45, right? So you have from the subject group, the 42 points, and then you have the 3 points from the core that I was talking about, right? So that's how the IB works, right? Just to give you a sense. So if you just look at that and you can think about, then let's say if I were to go to these schools, right? If I do make it in, yeah, is it different and how is it different? So if you look at the difference here, actually, a few things, right? So uh, number one, there is more emphasis on depth for A level, uh, and more emphasis on breadth for IB. So IB, more subjects, A level, less subjects, but I would say it's generally more intense, right? In terms of some of the requirements and everything, right? Next, you can see also this part I want to highlight a bit also, right? In terms of the administering by the National Exam Board and by the school itself. So this particular portion actually you will see is quite a key difference because for IB usually for each of the subject there is this thing that they do which is called the internal assessment. So what is this internal assessment? This IA part is, let's say for example, let's say you do math, right? Math IA means there is certain article that you want to research on. Or maybe if I just take economics as an example. So some of you may be interested in economics as you go into JC. Econs really talk about, the world, demand, supply, and everything. So for IB, what do they do for economics? There's one part of it is what they call as internal assessment. So internal assessment, actually, they have to do 3 papers. That means they identify an article, they will write a short essay on the article. So again, there's writing involved. But the catch here is that it's done outside of the classroom, right? It's done outside of the class. You do it at home. Once you are done, you give it to your teacher. The teacher comments on it. You refine it. So there's scope for you to refine. There's scope for you to do it outside of the exam hall venue, right? To perfect that paper, right? And this paper itself, it contributes for somebody who is doing a standard level subject. It contributes 30% of your overall score. Can you imagine? Right. So it's not trivial. It's actually a very significant percentage. And then you may wonder, so that means IB, there is this portion that is done outside of the class. Yeah, so that's the case, right? But A level is not like that. A level is all or nothing. That means you study, you go to the exam hall, you take the exams, and that's it, right? Your whatever you did in the exam hall will determine your grade. Yeah, there is nothing that's done outside of the class, unless of course you are looking at very niche subjects lah. But for all the main subjects, it's all done in the exam hall as an exam paper. But IB is not like that. IB has this out of exam hall components, and like the IA and everything. So that's another key difference between the two actually. Okay. Uh, and yeah, so Alvin is here. So as I was saying, so Alvin is co-founder of MindStretcher, and he has a lot of experience in terms of working with students in admissions to from post-secondary to tertiary, and he has also worked with a lot of students, in fact helping them to get like scholarships and admissions to different universities and all as well. So he will be sharing his perspective later, and anytime that you all have any questions, also feel free to just put that in the chat. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's the thing to note. The other thing for IB, so just to highlight also, like some of you may ask, right? So, which one is easier, right? So I would say that it really depends, right? So if you say for an equivalent subject, it's quite interesting actually because uh, I have like work with students for like say economics, right? Across like both IB and A levels. So you will recognize actually it's quite interesting because like let's say just taking econs as an example, somebody, if I just assess like have that level of knowledge for econs, at the A level track, actually that student may struggle quite a bit. He may actually be getting like a C grade, maybe, right? Based on that level of knowledge. But if you pour over that same level of knowledge to the IB, that student actually can manage to get a 6 out of 7. Well, 7 for the is a perfect score for econs in IB. that student with that same level of understanding can actually get a 6. That means a very credible score. Whereas under the A level, the student will struggle a lot. So what makes that difference is number one, I think certain things make a difference. The IA makes a difference, right? So the IA that the student can do outside of the exam hall, it makes a difference. And number two, you will see for certain subjects like this subject, right, on economics, the A levels focus a lot more on contextual analysis. That means they will ask you things like, oh, if I look at the price of Mao Shan Wang durian, why is it going up? So you must analyze, but in the context of that market. So there is that contextual, which I think you are not unaware of for many of you who did similar, higher order thinking questions when you were doing, your pure sciences in secondary school, or even when you were doing humanities, right? It's quite similar in terms of that skill, right? So that's what is required more of you, right, at that level. But IB, you will see actually for econs, the same kind of questions are more general, right? Usually they don't really have a context, but they will just ask you to come up with real world examples on your own. So all you need to do is be familiar with real world examples and support when you write your essay. So you can see there is that difference, right? But is it like that across? So I'm not saying it's like that across. I'm just giving an example. But across different subjects, I think there will be nuances, right? So it's not to say IB subjects are all generally easier compared to A levels. There are certain subjects actually they are harder. For example, like math, is known for some of the math components actually is more difficult. Yeah, so it also depends on the specific subject. Okay, yeah, so this is the key difference between the two, and it's just something for your consideration as well. But I think the very important takeaway here is that regardless of that, right, regardless of the content, I think each has their own strengths. So it's not to say that there is one that is inferior to the other, both in terms of their learning experience and both in terms of their track record and their perception, right, by scholarship communities, scholarship boards, and universities. I don't think there's a difference, right? So that's the key part just to note. Okay. Okay, so next, right? So just to look a bit, so we have touched on a few things. So we have talked about IB versus A-level track. We have talked about, the points. So I've gone through with you all the tools. So now I'll talk a bit now more about the subject combination, right? So some of you here may already start to know that. And for those of you who went to JC open houses, you will have heard from them also. For those of you who have not, usually what happens is that when you go to JC, right? So after you are posted there, you go to school. Usually the first week or so, as part of orientation, there will also be talks on that. So the schools will then tell you more about that too. So usually that's where it happens. But we are bringing it up here because I think some of you may be curious about that. In fact, it could very well be a determining factor for whether you want to go to JC or Poly and which JC you want to go. So we will talk a bit more about that here too. And one important thing to note is that you can see here, I think there's a matter of working backwards as well. So I think the key thought process here is very importantly, I think first and foremost, maybe to set it out front, as a JC student, um, the JC experience itself, right, if it does not tie to uni, it doesn't count for anything, right? So it's quite different from Poly. So Poly on its own, if you look at it in terms of the skills that you get, the experience that you get, is already very valuable, even from a workplace perspective, right? In terms of your career. But for JC, ultimately, you must recognize whatever you are doing in JC is like what you do in secondary, but magnified, right? Magnified. So in terms of the academic rigor, but ultimately it's still academic, right? So on its own, let's say you complete JC and you come out, you won't be able to really get a job, right? And it's only useful insofar as it ties into uni. So it provides the gateway to uni. So that's how we think about it, right? And given that, then it makes sense also that you should work backwards a bit. So what does it mean by working backwards is it's already a good time now to think a bit. Of course, you may not have that full sensing of really what exactly you want to do, but it's already worthwhile to start to think, right? So right now, what is your aspirations? What's your interest areas? What are possibly things that you want to do in future? And what will you want to study in uni, for example? For example, some of you may be already saying, oh, actually, I'm very keen on medicine. I want to go and be a doctor. I want to go and be a dentist. I want to go into law. I want to be an engineer, right? So it already makes sense from there to work backwards a bit. That means look at it as, okay, so let's say if I want to go to a uni, this is the course that I want to go. What are the prerequisites, right? And there are some prerequisites, right, for some of these courses. And definitely, if you want to go into these courses, then you must make sure that you have to study those subject combinations in JC that allows you to then go into that program, right? So that's what I also mean by working backwards from there, right? So that's the thing to note. And usually JCs themselves do have that, flexibility, right? By offering different subject combinations that students can do. So maybe just to let you all highlight how it works. So I think this question did come up yesterday when we mentioned. So I'm just going to show you all how this works. You can think of it as there's these two batch of subjects that you take going into JC, right? There is these compulsory subjects, and then there is the content-based subjects. The compulsory subjects is your GP, general paper, which is like your English equivalent, right? What you do in English in secondary school, but now it's called general paper in JC. You have your mother tongue, right? So mother tongue is provided, let's say if you actually had done higher mother tongue and got D7 and above in O levels, then you are exempted. But if you never do, then you have to take. And then project work. Project work is one of the key change that has happened, like announced by MOE previously. In the past, project work was considered as what we call as a H1 subject. That means people really put in the effort, try to do well for it because it's scored. But right now it's only pass fail, right? So pass fail means you either pass or you fail. But of course, you should pass it lah, right? There's no reason why you should be failing project work. But in that sense, it kind of takes away some of the that extra effort that you have to put into that particular area of work, right? So that's the other thing to note. So that's a key change that has happened. Project work now is on a pass-fail basis. In the past, it used to be scorable, but now it's pass-fail. Okay, so that's for the compulsory part. Then now there's a content-based part. So content-based part is actually, if you look at it here, generally, so students what they do is they'll take 4 subjects. 3 H2 and 1 H1. So in case you're wondering what's H2 and H1, H2, H1, and H3, right? There are 3 different difficulty levels. H1 is the lowest difficulty, H2 is in between, and H3 is the highest. Generally, if you look at it this way, usually what happens is students will take 3 H2 subjects and 1 H1, right? The 3 H2, essentially, the 3 H2 subjects, some of you may wonder, right? Is it always 3 H2? Is it possible for me to take 4? Right? Is it possible for me to take 4? So some people really quite, garang, quite ambitious. It's actually possible, right? So the in truth, schools do allow you to take 4 H2 if you want, subject to the fact that you have demonstrated that academic ability, right, to be able to do that, right? But is it necessary? That's another question. So that's what I will be touching on a little bit later in terms of the implications for the tertiary pathway. So, of course, there has been some changes to the tertiary pathway where that fourth subject is actually less critical now. So I will talk a bit about that. But to the question, so there's a question, can we take 4 H2? It's possible, right? So there are people who take 4 H2. There are also people who take 3 H2 and 1 H1.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to get an idea of the context of the audience. How many of you want to do A levels? And how many? Okay, let's talk about this first. I see a group of 60 people here. How many of you want to do A levels? Raise your hands. There's no right or wrong, okay? So I want to get the context right. How many of you want to do A levels? The first question. Raise your hands, please. So that at least we can see the virtual number of hands. Raise, please. Nobody? Cannot be, right? Okay. How many want to do the IB diploma?
Alvin, it looks like there's about 20 plus people who are raising hands for A levels. Yeah.
I see. Because I can't really see, I'm not too sure. Okay, never mind. How many do you want to do the IB diploma? There's a reason why I'm asking this question. Okay?
IB is about 5 or 6.
5 or 6. Okay. Yeah. Does any of you think that the IB diploma is less prestigious than A levels? Raise your hands. Because this is a very valid question. And this is a question which many teachers have erroneously gave the wrong answer because it's very clear. Because that's why I always ask you, raise your hands, okay? How many of you think you are not doing the IB diploma because you view the A levels as clearly superior? Raise your hands. This is a valid perception. This is a general perception, especially in Singapore. That's why we are here to clarify certain things. Moses, do you see any hands being raised?
Yeah, there's a handful.
There's a
Yeah,
handful.
five or six again. Yeah.
Okay, so let me give you the historical context so that you all know. I'm telling you the truth because we are in the system. You know, when Moses, I bring it back to the year 2020. Okay, I'm so sorry, 2010. 2010, 2009. So Moses was a Sec 4 student at RI. Okay, I know because I was telling him what he had to do. So I tell you what happened when he was a Sec 4 student at RI. Now, because I told you before that Moses is a 4-time RI all-round winner, so he'll definitely be the first cut of everything. So Moses received a letter, and this letter was only given to the top 10% of all RI students. Now listen carefully, That's why I want you to think about what I'm going to say. Prestigious or not prestigious, this letter given to Moses at the time from RI was this. RI is in the process, and these are the things which you will all never know. Okay, that's what I'm telling you. I'm giving you the reality of the situation. In that letter was stated this, okay? RI is applying to MOE to do the IB diploma, okay? But this option will only be given to the top 10% of all RIJC students. Now listen, all top 10% of all RIJC students. That means 90% of all the JC students will not be eligible if they are not in the top 10%. So I want to give you this idea. So given this situation, do you think that IB diploma is less prestigious than A-levels? Think about it. And why is it only given to the top 10%? So at that time, my advice to Moses was this, okay? I give advice depending on the type of student. Now, Moses is a very strong student and is a very good speaker. And for me, I'm a very practical person, okay? But like I said, the experience differs from students to students. So I'm just giving in general. Given his situation, this is what I told him. I said, if I were you, what I would do, if RI succeeds in getting the IB diploma, which I doubt it will, and I'm going to tell you why I was quite certain RI will not get it. Okay, I tell you why. So you must know the historical context. So I told Moses, if RI gets it approved, you do the IB diploma. Why? I told him very simple. Because IB diploma is going to be, given his capability, it's going to be very easy for him. And I'm a very practical person. Okay, if something I can get good grades, and I don't need to work so hard, I will do it. This is my point. And I told him as well, the only thing, my final opinion, the only thing which is probably more difficult in IB diploma is English paper relative to the GP, because I was studying it, okay? Other than that, I don't think they are. I really think that A-levels is a lot more challenging, okay? So this is my final opinion. But I said that you are a good speaker, you're good at English, this is nothing, okay? So if I were you, I would do this. And this is exactly what I do. If I were given a chance in RI, I was in RI and RJC in late 80s to 1991. I took my A-levels in 1991 at RJC. So I said, if I had a chance then, which IB diploma didn't exist at the time, I would definitely have taken the IB diploma. And true enough, MOE rejected the application. And I tell you why. I tell you why RI applied for that. Because at the time, the IB diploma, where it was, you must understand the Singapore system. We are all grounded in the British education system, right? So all of us did our O-levels, all of us did A-levels. It's entrenched. But at the time, IB came out and ACSI was the first to do it. They were willing to venture, to make themselves a little bit different. Okay? And when ACSI did it, ACS produced 60% of the world's top IB diploma students. 60%. Each and every cohort. It's a staggering number. So it's difficult. So I tell you the different context. And I tell you this is the reality. So if you are, let's say you're a top A-level student, you can't really say that you're top. But if you take the IB diploma, you got a perfect score of 45, you are literally top in the world. Full stop. Perfect score. So you can actually claim that. So when RI, I mean, this is just my speculation. If I'm the RI principal or what, when I look at the statistics, if ACS can produce 60 students with a perfect score, RI at JC can produce a lot more. And this one, I would absolutely agree, okay, by sheer numbers. But this for me would not be fair as well. I think Every school needs to have its own niche. If RI wants to be good in A levels, wants to be good with IB, I really don't think that is totally fair. And I expected it to be rejected, and it got rejected. Okay, so that is why RI came up with the Raffles Diploma. I'm just giving you the context. The Raffles Diploma is good for the resume, but it's no value when it comes to the application. Okay, so we need to be practical. IB Diploma is no less prestigious. I have got many students who did the IB Diploma. They got into various universities. They got into the professions which are very popular. They come from all. Everything is a function of score. And why do I say this? Even if you come from Malaysia, you come from Philippines, you may be having a different exam, but they would have a standardized system at university to ensure that there's some equivalence. Do you understand? Okay, so the common misconception which many parents and many teachers have, because I see these queries every year, so I want to clarify this one first. Number one, the IB Diploma is not as prestigious as A levels. That cannot be true. Simply because you've got president scholars getting the IB Diploma. The first president scholar with IB Diploma came from SOTA, and this was a Rosyth GEP student. Okay, so there are, and we have every year, even in Moses' year, you got a fellow president scholar from ACSI doing an IB Diploma. So how can you get president scholarship if it is not recognized, right? So this is a very, very common perception. The reason why I want to emphasize this because I hear JC teachers telling parents that you must avoid the IB Diploma because it's not recognized. That simply cannot be true by sheer logic. So that is why we're having this seminar to get the perspective right, okay? So is A level superior to IB? I won't say it is superior. Is IB superior to A level? It's not superior as well. It's just a system, okay? But I'm a practical person. I say because I'm not, but you must say it doesn't apply to everybody. Now I want to show you the implications. Project work is practically the only time in the JC system where students get to speak and express themselves. Is speaking and expressing themselves absolutely important? Absolutely. I teach many students at all levels. At the end of the day, speaking is very, very critical. You may be a top student. So let me tell you the scenario. Every year, I got many students coming to see me after finishing the A levels or the IB Diploma. I'm telling you the reality. I've been doing this for as long as I'm active, okay? Now, these students fall into two categories. Category one, they've never spoken much in their life. They may have super grades, and they come and see me. Mr. Kuek, can you help me for my interview next week? It can be for university admission place. It can be a scholarship. It doesn't matter. It entails speaking. And let me tell you, I will never be able to perform miracles. If you have not done this speaking at all, you do the minimum. Now you must understand, in school, everybody has project work, right? Even in any school, whether you go to Bukit Panjang High, whether you go to Bedok Secondary School, whether you go to Hwa Chong, whether you go to ACS, there will always be components of project work where you get to speak a lot. But it's just a ticking exercise. We all know that, right? Just because you speak a lot, you do well in oral, doesn't mean that you're good at speaking answers. No. This is where your speaking really comes into play. Okay, so right now, you look at the situation right now, they remove the scoring for project work, which is practically the only time where students get at least put a little bit more effort when it comes to the speaking. So I want you to be conscious of this because there are implications, okay? So whatever you do, and let me tell you, remember what I said before? The reality is that they cannot speak. So you may be super good grades, top grades at A level, but you cannot speak. I told them, I'm very frank, and I told you when you were in secondary school, you choose not to believe me, I will help them what I can, but let me tell you, it's very, very difficult because learning how to speak, getting that confidence is not something which you can mark overnight. You have to do it. There's no way to gain that experience. You cannot learn how to speak better. You cannot learn to be confident. You have got to gain it. You have got to get your hands dirty. Okay? So I want to emphasize this because speaking is absolutely core. Yeah? So I want to gain. So from that perspective, IB students may have a little age. Why do I say a little age? I won't say a major age because we always tend to generalize. Because I also know of many IB students who have gone through the system and they can't speak as well. Okay? So everything depends on what you actually do. So it's very, very important. And that is why we have NYOC. You know, last year we had all our speaking contests, all our debate sessions. Even the reason why we set up master speakers, all things is for an opportunity for students to get the confidence in speaking. And this is very, very core. So I want to set the context right, okay? So number one, for those of you who are not considering IB, I think it's a good option to consider. Okay, I'm being very practical and being objective here, right? I'm being very practical and objective because if I were given this option, I would take IB given my skill sets. Okay, so I don't think you all should disregard IB. Clear? And secondly, if you want to go to the top American universities, I'm very frank with you, IB actually plays a very important role. Okay.
Yeah, so
It's a lot easier than others, yes.
we were actually approached by an American firm to partner with them to work on a Singapore style preparation for international exams. And the exam that they asked for was not the IGCSE. They asked us to create a course for the IB. Okay, so what Alvin is saying, I think we're not saying that IB is superior to A levels, but we're saying you got to give it a shot. Yeah, as in it's equally recognized. Okay, so let us put that misconception to rest.
Yeah.
I think like on Alvin was making a few points just now. So I wanted to highlight the one about the communication because yesterday we talked about a few things. Those who joined us yesterday, we talked about how I think there are like about 3 or 4 very big secrets about JC that you really need to know from the start, which will also make all your choices a lot easier. The first secret is that your academics are going to be up to you. Okay, that they're really, even last time is mostly a lot of it is self-studying because it's a lecture, it's sort of like a lecture tutorial system already. And even more so today, there's so many resources, and if you study by yourself, like there is no way whichever school you are in, you have an equal shot of doing well. Because a lot of the materials are all available now, and it just takes hard work to go through. The second thing is that about CCAs, that actually there's a lot of opportunities to even create your own activities. Don't get boxed in by the activities in your JC. Right? If you're interested in the environment, if your JC doesn't have an environmental club, doesn't matter. There's so many things in Singapore, so many organizations, so many causes, so many problems to actually just go out and solve. So yesterday, I shared the example of a boy who was very interested in skateboarding in his city, and then he actually went to pitch business leaders around for funds to build a skate park in his community. Then he raised the money. He coordinated with the architects as well as the contractors, and he actually built and then started to operate the skate park. These are very, very unique and I think very meaningful ways to spend your time. Okay, so then on this third secret for me is this thing about communication. Okay, as in Alvin talks about it in the context of them taking away project work. So here, what makes a good communicator and why is it so important? Of course, one way to see it is where the government is going, right? There's a lot of emphasis on us being holistic. So it's not just about your grades. And for sure, I mean, especially all the parents who are on the call, you know that once you go into the working force, like the grades literally mean nothing. It may be in a few small sectors of the economy, particularly in the civil service, they still focus on who you were when you came in as a fresh grad. But in any place where there's a P&L, there's ability to deliver results, your results will speak for yourself. And what contributes to the results? It is who you are, your character, your ability to work hard, and most importantly, your ability to communicate with people. Okay, so that actually that is why the government is moving in that direction. But if you see in terms of how the world works, this is definitely the correct direction to move into. And in the JC level, you will have to communicate because I think from the very start, around this time already, all the pre-university scholarship applications are ongoing. Very soon, like once you hit promos, you will start to be able to research and then start to look at university applications, particularly if you're looking overseas. You will have interviews for both scholarships, for awards, there's a lot in the JC level. Okay, because it is where you are. And they are not just school awards anymore. They are national awards given by the ministries, given by various organizations, A-star scholarship, A-star award, which comes with an internship, many opportunities, is what I'm saying. Okay. So what makes a good communicator? First, like Alvin says, you just got to do it. Yeah. When I first learned public speaking under Alvin, I think like the first 1 or 2 sessions, I couldn't stop crying. Because I didn't know why I could not express what I wanted to say. No matter what, I can have actually everything in my head. When I'm in my room, I can say it properly. But when I go and talk to him, suddenly, it doesn't work. And what happens? What just happens is that the pipes are not flowing. You go in front of somebody, you suddenly feel that you have to speak differently. You suddenly feel that you have to put things across in a certain way. And what we try to do is to make sure that there is no gap between what you want to say and what actually comes out. Okay, so the practice is really important. And I encourage you guys in JC, definitely have a look at every opportunity that you get to go and speak, whether it's student leadership, whether it's just things in your classroom, whether it's various activities in the school, you should definitely go and give it a try. That one big thing is practice. Okay, and without that seriousness of project work, unfortunately, that is less practice going into JC for a skill that's going to be very, very important for you actually. Okay, but the second thing is apart from communication is actually knowing a lot about the world. Okay, and this will help you, of course, for speaking, but also for things like GP. Knowing a lot about the world, you need to know what's going on, how to formulate a point of view about it. And all this really, really will show up in your scholarship interviews. They will position you very well for university interviews, so on and so forth. Okay. That is why one of the things that we do with the Mind Stretcher students, particularly at the JC level, is the highest tier of our Master Speakers program. Okay, the Master Speakers program is meant to create that space for you to talk a lot, and then also through the materials, try to make sure that at least you know some stuff. Of course, if you want to read more, you will definitely go far beyond the curriculum. Okay, but very, very important to get exposure, to understand what's going on. It helps you for your interviews. It helps you for things like GP as well. Okay, so I just wanted to underline that. Communication is something to really focus on as you start to going into the JC. Last time you might just see it as part of your projects, okay, but you're starting to, as I mentioned yesterday, it is around the end point of your pre-tertiary education already, and communication skills are going to be critical for life in the real world. Okay. Okay. Weilun, do you want to continue
Yeah.
taking through?
Yeah, can. Okay, can. Yeah, so thanks, Moses and Alvin. Yeah, so anytime that y'all have any other questions, feel free to type in the chat and then we will take it from there. For now, I think just now I was also going through the subject combination part. So let me just touch a bit more on that. And anytime there's any questions that are elicited from that, you can also take it up or any other questions as well. Okay. So as mentioned, right? So we were talking about the subjects combination and what has changed, right? So I think we have talked quite at length about the difference between the IB and the A-level track. The thing to note, as I was saying just now, for A levels, one of the key changes is that right now you have these subjects that you take. In case you're wondering, H1, H2, H3 is really in terms of that difficulty level. So if you look at it, what's the difference between a H1 and a H2, even in terms of the coverage as well. So just take for example one subject on economics, right? In short, actually, the H1 part, there are certain topics that they don't cover at all, right, compared to say the H2 syllabus. So number one, the syllabus is reduced, right? You study less topics. Number two, even in terms of the exam requirement is also lesser. So for example, again, using the same subject as an example, students doing H2 for econs have to write essays and they also have to do case studies, right? But students in H1, they only need to do the case study component. There's no extra essays for them to write. So again, the exam component is also reduced. So generally, the H1, because of that, in terms of the amount of time that's dedicated, is actually less, right? And then there's this thing that you may wonder, what is this H3? So H3 actually is something that, in the long past, the equivalent of it during my time and during your parents' time, that will be what we call as special papers. So special papers is something that, after the end of J1, after you have done your promotional exams, If you have proven your proficiency in that particular subject, you can actually apply to do a H3. H3 is like an add-on, so it does not replace the H2 subject. So let's say, for example, you are doing H2 mathematics and you did very well for that in the promotional exams, then you may take as an add-on this H3 level subject. And usually this one is, some more difficult knowledge or something that is more enrichment based. And in fact, for some of it, it can even be modules that you can take outside of the JC, even as a uni course actually. So for econs in the past, there was this H3 module on game theory that they can actually take at the university level as a kind of module that they can learn. But it does not replace the H2 program, right? So they still have to take the H2. The H3 is like an add. And you may ask them, why do people take H3? So H3 usually there's two things to it. So one, H3 is a good way for you to increase your exposure, right? Deepen your proficiency in a certain subject. That's one. Two is also it helps, right? So in terms of be it like application to scholarships, right? So for example, let's say some of you are interested in scholarships, that can be one factor, right? That for consideration between different candidates, right? Taking a H3 subject. So that's some of the key considerations there, lah, right? And the other key thing is also, in case you're wondering what's this contrasting discipline thing, the idea behind that is that now what happens is you have to take three subjects. Let's say you're in the science stream, three subjects will be more along the math and science line, but there will always be one that is contrasting. That means that one will be like the arts slash humans. So that's why you can see in JC now, a very common subject combination is the BCME or the PCME, right? So biochem, math, econs, physics, chem, math, econs. So econs will usually be that contrasting subject, right? And then let's say you're in art stream. So let's say if you're in art stream, then you can see here, people take like history, econs, literature, and then math will be the contrasting, right? So that's how it works. It's an interesting development because long time ago there wasn't this, right? So in the long past there wasn't such a thing as a contrasting subject. In fact, if you were to take something like BCME, it will be an odd combination, right? Long past actually there were people who were able to do like physics, chem, bio, math. And that's what we call it as like the triple science that allows them to go into medicine and all that. But now you don't have that anymore because right now MOE focuses a lot more on, like diversified exposure, holistic exposure, having these contrasting subjects and everything. So you cannot have like a triple science combination. And so people, if they want to have a balance, that's why you can see PCME, BCME are the ones that are very popular because they get to do like the main science subjects, right? So the physics and the chem or the bio and the chem, and then the math part, and then they also get to do like this balance, right? So that's how we look at it. There's also the hybrid. So the hybrid one is two core and two contrasting. This one here is typically is like what I say, it's a mix. Hybrid, what happens is that usually your scheduling may look a bit more weird compared to other students because usually when the schools plan the timetabling and everything is the main bulk will be around the science and the art streams lah. The hybrid streams, because you are taking subjects across streams, it can result in sometimes the cases where the timings for your classes is a bit different, right? That's also the other part. And I think also previously yesterday we also mentioned interesting thing about JC now is that you will see actually a lot of the and you all will know also JC the key difference is that in the past when you look at secondary school, right, you were looking at it in terms of classroom based learning. But JC actually you can think of it as it's split into lecture and tutorial, right? So there are lectures where is you just listen in a large group to a teacher lecturing. Then after that, you have small group tutorials. Tutorials is a lot like your classroom experience in the past, where you are in a small class and then you have a tutorial where you work through like the questions with your tutor, right? So that's how it works. What has changed now is that you will see a lot of times for many of the subjects, the lectures are actually watched at home. That means they allow you to do it outside of class. You just watch it at your own time, right? And the reason, so you may think that's a bit weird, right? Like why is it like that? And why do they allow that, right? Why if students don't follow and they don't watch the videos, they don't catch up with the lectures? And it does happen, right? So I think in fact, for some of the students that we work with, you can see that actually they may fall behind, right? Because they are very busy. They will say, okay, I don't have time to watch the video. And then the first time they watch the video is right before the exam. So it's quite tragic, right? So you hit the last minute, they cram for the exam instead of watching video because they have not even learned the concept for the first time. And it's quite common, right? But why does this happen? Then why do schools allow that? It's because it's actually not very different from in the past. Because you all will realize actually, even in the past, when people go down to lectures, that means last time it was done in lecture theatre, lecture hall in school. You will realize the reality is a lot of people go there and they sleep, right? So they go inside, they are daydreaming, they are sleeping, they are not going for the lecture. So it's pretty much the same. Ultimately, it boils down to your discipline and your accountability, actually, right? So regardless of whether you are supposed to go physically or you're watching from home. And the reason for that is so now is then they acknowledge that they give you that flexibility to cover that as part of this thing. And actually there's some flexibility that's freed up. For example, some schools they don't have a 5 day week. Depending on the school, they may have a 4 days. And then one of the days, right, can be a CCA day or it can be a day where other things can happen, right? So other than academics. So that's how schools have actually in JC has worked lah, and it's quite different from secondary school. So just to highlight for everybody, okay. And in case some of you are wondering also, so you can see for example like for hybrid, some of the really combis in case you're wondering that's quite killer combis like that's why you don't really see much of that like history, geography. It's quite for example these are the combis that for example are very content intensive, very intensive also in terms of the essay writing. And that's why usually you don't see this kind, right? Because usually it will be too much in terms of the amount of content that people have to cram and so on as well, right? So that's the key part over here. The thing to note is that are there prerequisites for this? So I think sometimes people do wonder, right? About the prerequisites and everything. So what you need to know is that this can vary from school to school. Generally, the way to look at it is that all of these subject combinations and the subjects, there will be certain assumed knowledge, right? So for example, it's quite well known, and I hope and all of you do know that that if you do H2 mathematics, technically actually the basis for H2 mathematics is A math, right? Is A math. So that means actually most, if not all students going into H2 math technically should have done A math, right? If you have not, then the thing is on a case by case basis, discuss with the school. What can happen is a few things. One, some schools may still allow you to take H2, but you have to do bridging, right? That means you are expected to bridge the knowledge gaps on your own, which there will be quite a number because if you all know, the whole topic on differentiation, integration, calculus is a big part, right? That means you go into H2 maths, you are assumed to have known all that already, right? And if you don't, that means you are expected to bridge on your own, right? So that's the thing. That is part of that assumed knowledge, right? And it's also quite similar for some of the other subjects, right? Like sciences and all that as well. So generally, you can see here, if you look at it, right, I have two screenshots here. It's actually from two different schools. One is TJ and one's NJ. It's just to give you a snapshot. So the one on the left is TJ. The one at the bottom right is NJ. And what do they mean by the indicative cutoff, in case you're wondering, is that sometimes even within the school itself, it depends on the subject combination and the subjects. Because some of it may be very popular, it may result in a case whereby it's oversubscribed in that, they have a certain quota, right, in terms of the number of places for that. So if that's the case, then it may be the case that, there is what we call that cutoff. Cutoff is essentially that last score, right? The minimum score required of a student to enter. That's how they look at it in terms of the indicative cutoff. Usually, this is the case whereby there are certain combinations or certain courses that are very popular, lah, right? So that's the thing to note. And generally, in terms of like the prerequisites, so how much they enforce it. So if you look at the different schools, it really varies. For some schools, they will say, I really strongly encourage that before you take a certain subject, you have the prerequisite subject that you took in secondary school. For some, they will be like, okay, so you may not have it, but it's okay. So you just expected to bridge the knowledge on your own. Some may also offer a short bridging course to help. So it varies from school to school. And in fact, this is the part that it will be helpful if you are in that category. When you go for open houses, that's one thing that you should check with the school. That means in that particular school, how does it work, right? Let's say you go in and maybe you did combined science, right? And you feel like, okay, I want to do this H2 camp. How will I be disadvantaged? Is there anything that I need to brush up on? And is there anything in school that can help to support me? These will be the things that will be helpful actually to check, right? Because there are some variances across schools for these actually. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's
I
also
thought
yeah.
I wanted to add on this prerequisite side. So this is the prerequisites for your JC subjects lah. But actually a lot of the questions in the chat are about whether what do you have to take in JC so that you have the prerequisites for your university course. Okay, so let's address that quickly, for everybody's benefit. Okay, so if you look okay, so um what you will find lah, okay, generally speaking, okay, I'll just take these things in order. So if you guys can direct your attention to the chat, right? Okay, econ. Common question: econs versus geog. Okay, so generally what Alvin said is I will agree as well. Econs is quite a useful concept to take, especially in the JC level. It's a bit different from the university level. University level, econs is primarily mathematics. Okay, but at the JC level, actually the econ concepts you learn they carry very heavy weight. Like I think these are actually quite useful things to learn. Okay, but for geog, right? You guys should know that geography at the JC level is primarily human geog, not physical geog. Okay, so in that sense, is very similar to GP, just focusing on a few different areas. All right. Um, so up to you to choose. I think you will find them to be all quite similar lah. They are the humanities and they cover things from different aspects. Um, but in my opinion, just having gone through a little bit more life after JC, actually the econs concepts you learn in school are quite useful. Okay. Is there any chance that without chem, I might lose potential engineering seats for overseas universities? So I'll take this question together with another one about if I take econs as H1, can I do econs in uni arts? Okay, so if you look at this slide that Weilun has up here, right? Okay, just to cut through the noise, because there's going to be countless combinations you can look at depending on what you want to do in university, then you have to work backwards to your prerequisites. But generally speaking, chemistry and mathematics, if you take both of those, you keep your options fully open. Okay, of course, then you take one more science for all those that want to do some science related degrees lah. But actually, the foundation for a lot of things, whether it's you want to become a electrical engineer or various kind of engineering, you want to go into medicine, dentistry, you want to go into economics, your primary prerequisite is going to be very strong mathematics for all the engineering disciplines, not that you take physics, okay, in JC. You just need to know your mathematics down core. Physics is just a applied form of mathematics. So your mathematics is really important, not just to take it as a prerequisite, but in my opinion, like mathematics is the one thing in JC that a lot of people get knocked off course for because like they think that they are okay in O levels, then it really really steps up in JC. So you should stay on pace with it. Okay. But not just to take it as a prerequisite to get into university, but if you really spend time well, I think that the mathematics can take you quite far. It's a very useful skill to be strong at mathematics. Okay, then chemistry as well. Okay, so the question here about econs, yeah, you will find that if you look at the uh, Singapore unis, UK universities, US universities, um, you get partial credit, for doing certain mathematics modules at JC already, uh, for even if you go into an econs degree, but you don't really get any partial credit for taking econs. Yeah, because economics at the university level is mainly mathematics. Yeah, there's a lot of writing down models and then deriving the characteristics of the models. And when you derive it, you will definitely use calculus to see how the dynamics change at various points. So yeah, generally speaking, mathematics chem will keep most of your pathways open. And then if you're quite sure you want to do a sciencey degree or you're quite interested in doing it, then make sure you do a science track because some of these will require two sciences. Okay, but you'll see chemistry is always the requirement. What is your take on CLEP? Chem, Lit, Econs, Physics, is it? Leong? Yeah, so I mentioned, I mean, in my opinion, you really should have maths in there. Otherwise, unless you're super sure that you never want to touch any of these. See, even the fields that are not really considered STEM, right? Like things a bit more like data science or economics or business. Like you will need some mathematics, you know. So I would not cut out mathematics lah from your JC selection if it were me. And but of course, depending on your situation, if you really think that maths is not for you, you're quite sure that you're going to go into more of an art stream in university. That's what you feel that there's enough options there for you to consider. Then you can go ahead. And if you really dislike maths, okay. But generally speaking, because of both university and how useful it is for general life, I think the maths is quite a useful thing to include lah.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I want to share with you a real case, because we do understand that some students really don't like maths and they say that fine, I'll go into a course which really doesn't require maths. And it happened to somebody I know. So this person didn't take mathematics and ended up in a university, okay? Not local university, so ended up in an Australian university. The problem arose when he realized that he doesn't really like the course
Yes.
he was in. Then die. Because even when you try to transfer, almost every arts other course had the mathematics. So he was stuck and had a very miserable time. So I think in general, we all need to be realistic. Okay, the minute you put off mathematics, I think it's really dangerous. That means it's all or nothing. When I say all or nothing, it's really like if your father is very rich, you can afford to pay your way, no problem. Okay? But if it's a very competitive university, you cannot really pay your way through. Okay? So I repeat, so it depends on which university you're applying, but your options become considerably limited at any time when you want to, because the reality is that there are students who try to transfer. I personally know of quite a number of students who actually transfer courses every year when they're in university, because somehow or other it didn't fit their requirements. So fine. So they swap. Even my youngest brother was an NUS scholar, super brilliant guy. And he couldn't take his first year course because he did computer engineering and he deserved a swap course. Okay, so this spreads across all types of students. Okay, yeah. So back to you. So unless you really cannot make it, then maybe. But I'm just giving you this option. If you really don't want to take mathematics at A levels, why don't you consider IB diploma? This is my frank opinion, okay? Because I'm just sharing you my frank opinion. When I because I was looking at the IB mathematics and science 2 years ago, because I was giving, because I make it a point to know the thing. When I look at the A-level mathematics and A-level sciences, I was a triple science student, so I took biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics at A-levels. Those times when everybody had to take that one, they gave you the most possible options, right? That was in the year 1991. Okay, so obviously I'm a science and things, but trust me, I threw away everything after my A-levels. After my A-levels, everything went into the dustbin already. So when I look at the A-levels, mathematics and sciences for all of session, I'm blur. I'm literally blur. I catch no ball. Okay? But when I look at the IB science, it doesn't matter whether it's biology, chemistry, physics. I look at the mathematics and I find that this is my frank opinion. This is my frank opinion. Is not opinion, it's not a fact. Just based on what I can see. I think if those of you who get good grades for your O-level science and maths, IB science and maths, it's not going to be a problem. This is my frank opinion. Because when I look at it, my personal opinion is that I think the O-level science and maths, some questions are way harder. This is my frank opinion. Again, it's my opinion. So, because you see, why I say my opinion? Because when I look at it, I think I can do. I think that I just revised a bit, I can do. A-level, I have boom. Okay, but because I'm in education, this stance is probably right, so I'm just sharing you objectively. So I think if you don't want to take A-levels, you may want to consider doing IB maths, which is generally, I can almost certainly say it is easier. Obviously, it is spiral approach, but on the balance of things. Yeah. Okay, back to you, Moses.
Oh yeah. No, I wanted to uh yeah, I think maths is important lah. Okay. Like what Alvin said, just I mean, excuse me, for both the students and the parents on the call, I think we just got to stay a bit humble as to how much people change as you leave school. Okay, like every 6 years in my life, I find myself I cannot even recognize who I was uh 6 years ago. Yeah. Because of how much things I have been exposed to in the world, then my interests have changed, my worldview has changed completely. And if you ask the 18-year-old me to predict what the 24-year-old me how he thinks, I have no clue. Yeah, I tell you guys, when I entered JC, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. By the time I finished university, I knew that I really, really enjoyed investing and building uh, technology apps and solving technology problems, And then 6 years later, after having worked for a while, then, I have an even clearer view of what I want to do. But these things change a lot. Okay. And at this point of your time in your life, just by virtue of how young you were and how our society works, actually, you haven't had a lot of chance to work in the real world yet. So I would encourage you guys, unless it's really exigent circumstance, you are allergic to mathematics, when you open a maths paper, like why you feel like you got hives. Otherwise, I think I would give it a shot lah, and keep your options open. Okay. And that goes for the same questions here. I think from Clara, I don't really have a strong view. If you have the thing that you will miss here, if you do math and further maths and chem econs, is that you will miss out on those subjects that require double science lah. Okay, but your math and chem will keep quite a lot of things open. Okay, let me take this question about computing. Okay, I mean, this is something that I have some personal experience with. I was a lead product engineer. I was a lead product manager in this part of GovTech called Open Government Products. We invented things like parking SG, CDC vouchers, the stuff that you guys like to use. And I personally was leading the artificial intelligence projects in government. So any of you here who are civil servants, if you use PAIR, that was born like in my head, and then we drove it through for the past 2-3 years, and then now I think more than 100,000 civil servants they're using it every month. Okay, so let's talk about Linda, because artificial intelligence is a huge deal today lah, and something that you guys will definitely need to understand. But what does it mean for your JC? So if I'm interested to get into business, artificial intelligence system course in U, how should I choose to get on track with my goal? Okay, generally speaking, it doesn't really affect what you do today. You don't need to do computing. That is my view. Okay. In fact, I've always found that the way that computing is taught in school and the way that you will end up using it are two very, very separate things. It's not just a problem in JC, it's a problem in university as well. Because they always feel that they need to make it very formal and academic. That means they can check what you have learned. But frankly, any of you who have built apps, it's a lot more, it's not super rigorous. It's actually a lot more exploratory. And the skill set to build an app versus the skill set to do well in a university computer science course, I think is quite different. So I wouldn't say you have to do computing. I would say same things. If you have this rough interest, artificial intelligence, I'll tell you that is mostly mathematics as well. What you'll do in the classrooms is that you will derive things like the neural networks that currently power all the large language models today. If you understand, it's mostly differentiation and linear algebra, right, which we will all learn in JC. And of course, you will keep learning more and more lah. But that is why I think for me, any field where it's just where you want to invent stuff, you're going to need mathematics, okay? Because you need to be able to work with equations. And what your JC gets you to, why I actually really, really am thankful for the JC experience in Singapore is that they really choose the scope correctly. Like if you go and look at any mathematician's blog post, okay, the toolkit that you need to excel in any field, any applied field, whether it's econs, econometrics, quantitative finance, where you make a huge amount of big bucks, data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, your toolkit, the basic needs to end at linear algebra. And that's where JC will bring you to. Okay, linear algebra means that you have calculus and you know how to and then you know how to manipulate these in vector and matrix form. Okay. Um, yeah, so I think the only thing that you really need to do is do your chem and then make sure you do well, because if you want to get into business and artificial intelligence, it's going to be competitive. Yeah. Does taking computing have any benefit then? I don't think so. Yeah. In fact, what I would suggest, if you actually are considering a technical, not technical career, but if you want to be involved in building stuff, actually the best thing to do, and it's as a program that I just led over the holidays as well, the best thing to do is to just to actually build stuff. You know, like rather than trying to learn it in a classroom, the basic tutorials can be done within 1, 2 weeks, I think, for most students, regardless of your initial ability. And then with AI stuff, with like some guidance, you should have your first app out there within the first 1, 2 months. You know, and once you do that, you will find yourself noticing all sorts of problems. So on a personal note, my dad-in-law, for the longest time was, uh, I think he always was interested in building stuff, but when I tried to show him a bit of programming, then he found it very boring. That was 3 years ago, so I didn't force it. Now with AI, I reintroduced it to him, and he has taken to it like a moth to a flame. You know, so he himself goes to do the tutorials, and then he'll just spend a lot of time discussing with ChatGPT, because the basic stuff, all of these AI models, they know it quite well. And then subsequently, he actually launched a little app for just for things around him, right? He likes to go on these runs on Sunday with a group of friends. Then every Sunday, actually, they find themselves, they need to remember to check the weather. They need to remember to go and check whether there's any road closures, any events happening there, so that they can set the meeting point for the run and all that. And then he made a simple bot that did that. And then now it's working. After he did that, I always tell people that once you just develop a little bit of a sense of what it takes to build stuff, you will find that the ideas come to you in floods, because now you know what is possible. And true enough, so today when we just finished dinner, on his whiteboard he has 30 ideas. And all of them are very practical because it's things that he's seen in his own life. So for yourselves, same thing, you know, rather than, oh, I want to do computing, I want to go into Facebook and all that next time, then I need to do computing now. I don't think so. I think what is much better for your learning, and also from a very realistic viewpoint, what is better for university applications and all that is actually to do real projects, and get your ideas out into the world. Okay, this is something that very passionate about. I think is also a very creative way to lead your life. When I went to RI recently, um, a lot of the teachers were just telling me too that they find it very hard to think of these ideas, right? And I told them it's because you don't know how to make even a simple thing, right? Before you think of a huge thing to solve things, just when you're walking around, if you're organizing an open house, how do we make a virtual map? Yeah, let's just start with small things. Or when you go to the canteen, do you want an easy way to from your classroom to be able to see how long the different queues are? Start with these kind of problems, you know, and then when you solve them, you find a lot of gratification because all your friends are using them. These are all like narrow and like painful problems that people can relate to, and then you can go from there. Okay, so I mean, it's a long answer, but I think for computing, my strong view is that it's better to get practical experience rather than just pursue it via the subjects. Okay. Let's see. Weilun, there's a question in the chat. What does H2 math?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think Alvin was talking about that in relation to the prerequisites
Oh,
for
yes.
economics at uni.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think just to share, so I think both I actually did economics at university. So if you look at it in terms of JC and uni, it's quite interesting because you will realize that there are some things that are different and some things that are quite similar. What's different is that at JC, there's much less focus on math when you do econs. That means at JC, you're actually focusing a lot more on economic intuition, economics concept. But when you go to the uni level, actually then the math really does come in. And in fact, certain areas, right? Like for example, when you all learn things like differentiation, integration, those are actually things that will become important for economics actually when you learn it at the uni level, right? When you learn about the models and everything. So that's what Alvin means when you say, for you to learn econs well at uni, actually it would be good if you have a good mathematics foundation. And in fact, even at uni, I can tell you there are some prerequisite courses on calculus like differentiation, linear algebra. You will have to do them as part of your degree for economics. Yeah, so that's one part. Then you may ask me, but then does that mean JC is on the wrong track? If how come like this whole math part and everything is not there? I think what was useful for JC is that, and I think they were on the right track, is that they give you a good economics intuition. So they focus a lot on economics concept, but in going through the concepts, actually it gives you a lot of the intuition, that sensing that you need. That then when you go to uni, actually as you learn econs, it's also easy for you to pick up on that. Okay, so that's the other thing just to take note lah. Yeah, so that's the part here. And personally, I think some of you were asking about the difference between geog and economics, and I think the thing about econs is indeed there's a versatility to it, both in terms of how you engage with like real world things. Like right now, as you all read the news, right, you all read about Trump and tariffs and everything, trade wars. Actually, these are things that you can better appreciate once you learn economics. You are able to better put them in that context, better able to explain and reason about them. So that's the interesting part. You get to better appreciate a lot of them in greater depth lah. That's one thing. And even in terms of future job options also. So if you look at it, is if you do econs in university, actually I think in terms of that, analytical mindset, that kind of logical thinking, problem solving, is also useful. I think that itself also is a kind of mindset that is helpful in terms of be it in terms of a generally skills that is required lah across different industries also. So that's for the econs part. Just to check, I think one of you were asking with regards to the four H2 subjects, right? So maybe I will cover a bit on that. Uh, in terms of what it means for calculation for universities, there has been some changes already. So with effect from your batch actually is one of the batches that are already affected. In the past, so what has happened is this, right? So in the past, what happens is the four subjects that you take, right? They all factor in for your university rank points, right? Your university admission score, which is upon 90 in the past, right? Because it factored in your four subjects. It also factored in like GP and project work. But what has happened now, what has changed now is that uh, GP is still in, but project work is now pass fail, right? So project work is not counted, it's just pass fail, right? So what is counted is just GP as a H1 and your three H2 subjects, right? Your three H2 subjects. Then you may wonder, but what happens then to the very last subject that I take, which is that H1 for some of you, or it could also be a H2 if you're for H2. So in short, that last subject is not counted. So there's one subject that's not counted. When is it counted? That last subject is only counted if it improves your overall score. So if you turn out that you did very well for that, then they will give you credit for it. They will include it in, they will count it for you. But if you didn't do well for it, you can totally drop it. It's as though you it's not counted at all. So you will just take three subjects. And the reason for that is because it's a way for you to then streamline your study load a bit, right? So that means let's say you find that the four subjects is really hard to cope. Some students, what happens is then they will prioritize the three, and of course the three will be the three H2 subjects lah, right? The three H2 subjects. Then the very last H11 they may focus a bit less because they don't see it as eventually counting towards their university rank point. As a result, you will also know now the rank points has dropped. So in the past, it used to be 90. Now it's upon 70, right? It's upon 70, right? So that's also the other consideration. Okay, so in relation to the question on that. Yeah. For the question, I think there's one with regards to if you took combined science, is it possible to do H2 science? Generally, that is the case. But again, there could be some variation across JC. So it would be good to just check in with the JC that you're looking at. Where for some of the JCs, for instance, they may have more reservations if you want to do two H2 science subjects. One is still okay, but two, it depends on the school. And also they may require some bridging. And they may also require that you do some bridging program first with them, right? If you were to do that. So it really has to depend on the school to school. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So these are the
Yeah.
key
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
I think that's a very important question. So I want to add on to what Weilun said. What Weilun said is true, but I just want to add on a couple of things. Now, most JCs in Singapore, I say most JCs, as a general rule, they do not allow students with combined science to take H2 physics, chemistry, and biology. And the reason is this, because H2 science assumes a full pure science foundation. Okay, general rule. However, there are exceptions, which is why it was exactly like what Weilun said. It is possible if you generally score A1 or A2 for your combined science, you did exceptionally well in the relevant components. So it's JC dependent. Very, very important. So you really need to check with the JC. It's JC dependent. Okay, but in general, you need to have a good distinction to have a chance. If you don't get a good distinction, then I think it's difficult, because just imagine that because the times have changed as well. Times have changed. Last time during my time, if you don't take, I'm just giving you real examples. If you don't take biology at O levels, you can still take biology at A levels. But that is, for me, is only for those super students, because you really need to study very, very hard. Okay, but it can be done. But right now, it's not a rule anymore. So it's really JC dependent. Okay, but generally it is not guaranteed. It is on a case by case basis. Okay, so you just need to be aware of it. But if you are looking at taking H2, I suppose you get a distinction. I think it is possible, but not guaranteed. Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
yeah, and generally among the three sciences, right? This is a general thing. It's not like exact science. The most restrictive is probably H2 physics. Okay. Why? Because of the concepts involved, the mathematics involved generally. But again, I'm just saying at a general level, it is not a fact. Okay. Yeah. But you really need to check with the JC. Very important. Yeah. All you have to do before you make a decision, call. You really have to call. Okay. Call or right now, because maybe the calls the lines are all jammed up. Tomorrow morning, just go to the JC and ask. Don't sit down here and try to imagine. Okay, very important. Call. If not, just go to the JC office. Is this allowed? Then we can make a more informed decision, and it varies by JC. Okay, cool. But you try calling first, lah. Okay, fine. And it's sending an email as well, so that at least you get a official confirmation. They'll generally try to reply to you. Okay, fine, thanks.
Yeah, so like what Alvin was saying, if you all take a look, there are some information that some of them they actually put out. So actually, if you look at the school website, I mean that's also another information
Yes.
source law. So you all actually
What's
can
that
see from
important?
here. For example, you can see actually Temasek one, they put it out quite transparently. Like you can see here for the H2, H2O chemistry, they actually have that cutoff, which was based on last year law. So essentially for the students entering, for pure chem, they will have a B3. And this was what Alvin was mentioning about. So if you are combined science, actually
Quite nice.
generally, they expect you to do better. Yeah. Okay, but again, this is the part that it will be good for you to clarify with the school when you fall into these areas. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it's very important to look at the school website. Very, very important. Because this in general, if they put it here, that would be it really. Okay. So I'm verifying you. If you see officially on the school website, that would be the requirements already. The only question is when they're not see, and generally that would be true. Right? If you take combined science, you need to get a distinction. At least it's either A1 or A2. General rule. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Alvin, I wonder what is. I would love to get your thoughts on Linda's question.
What is Linda's question?
So if you see the chat, she has a net score of 5. This is on the business AI course in university. So she's asking, actually, given that she has this interest, would it be better to take the poly route? But she has a net score of 5 .
Okay,
Very, very good score.
Okay, so there are a couple of considerations here. We have a net score of 5, and this is the reality. Okay, so you must bear in mind that I was a poly lecturer. After I left the finance field, I joined the poly for 4 years. And this is my frank opinion. The minute you are a good student with a net score of 5, you definitely you will definitely be one of the top performing students in the poly. This is the reality. And if you work hard, the reality is this, the reality is that the poly is going to give you all the opportunities, all the scholarships, and all the book prices, which generally, when you enter university, you can actually be very, very strong. Okay, the reality, the local uni. So I tell you, this is the reality. Like I mentioned, the batch of poly students has changed really. Last time, there is no way a poly student is going to get a first class honors or a highest distinction in local university. No way. But right now, they're going to give the top A-level students a run for their money. Because you know why? The one good thing about poly is that it is grounded in practical applications. Do you understand? It is a key advantage. And that is for the reason why many engineering students, it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be in local use. Even if they go to Imperial College, they get first class. Specific because they get hands-on practical. So if you talk about business AI, definitely in poly, it is more hands-on, more real case. Like in JC, however you see it is very theoretical. This is the basic reality. So there's no hard and fast rules, but you're gonna get a lot of options. So I'm just giving you this idea, right? So if you a net score of 5 is pretty good, you go to the poly and if you keep on with this, you'll be on the radar. Okay, and definitely if I am a poly, one of the top students, I win the book prizes. You compare this to an average A-level student, it is a no contest. Okay, I'm just telling you, this is from a practical perspective, yeah. But do you get actually hands-on, more practical experience? Absolutely. It's almost guaranteed by nature of the curriculum. So make no mistake, poly curriculum is less rigorous. But this is always my point. Less rigorous doesn't mean that it is not good, correct? Like you have an RI curriculum, it's super hard. I always find that, why do they make things so hard? Okay, why do they make things so hard? But it's hard. Is it necessarily a good thing? Not necessarily. It may be good for the good students, but the average is not so ideal. Okay, but so my views of poly have actually changed after I entered the poly as a lecturer. This was in the years 2004 to 2007. And I know because the poly, the deans, whatever, they still keep in contact with me and they actually invite me every now and then to give talks to the poly students to inspire them and so forth. Or they even bring the poly students to my stretcher to present the case study to me. Okay, so I think a poly is a good option. Okay, yeah, this is my frank opinion because the reality is confirmed. Poly is a lot less competitive than JC. It is a given. It is a fact by nature of the students who go in there. So if you're hardworking, if you do well, and I've seen this across many of the students at poly, the really competitive ones. Okay, so everything depends on how diligent you are. Everything, whatever the school, whatever the circumstances, it's all about being diligent. 10 years ago, I was at a dinner table with then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. Okay, I'm telling you this real story. Okay, so I was at the dinner, and the minute he knew that I was in education, he was very interested. So we started talking about education. Then we talked about different routes, whether PSLE, O levels, the new scoring system, and so forth. Then it came to the subject of poly students because I told him that I was also a poly lecturer. Then he became very interested. So I told him, in the 4 years I was at poly, amazing thing have happened. I had in the first 2 years of poly, I had 2 classes, and these 2 classes are IT students. Now you must remember, IT students. IT students, if you translate to your PSLE score at the time, IT school is below PSLE 160 and below. In terms of your PSLE score, is like in the range like 27, 28. Okay, for PSLE, I'm just converting. In those 2 years. So you see, and the poly segregated them because being from the IT, they may suffer an inferiority complex against the others, which is real. But in my 2 classes, there were 2 students who come to me they do every single tutorial and they ask me for more questions. These are all the technical, like accounting, finance. They do everything. Very hardworking. And let me tell you, in those 2 years, the top student was a perfect 4.0. Top student, they beat every every single poly student, IT students, when I told PM Lee, he was astounded. He said, that's why. That's why it is a journey for everybody. I said, he's told me that these were amazing stories, which he doesn't hear from the ground. So everything is a question of attitude. So even those students at the level, and during when I was a poly lecturer, there are already 6-7 pointers there, which didn't exist when I was a JC student. There were 6-7 pointers there already. Now it's even more. Okay, so just because you go to the poly doesn't make you become a less inferior student. As I mentioned before, I brought in the example of the girl, right? From Crescent Girl, 6A1s. 6A1s. Okay, 6A1s, and her net is 3, but she entered the poly, now SMU Law. She wins all the poly. She's on the dean's list for all the poly, so that may be a better option. Okay, there's no right and wrong, but this is how I feel, especially for business, things like business AI. Okay, so it's not an exact science, but you can consider that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
In fact, I mean, maybe just to give a even broader perspective, I mean, there are many of the top American companies are now recruiting directly from high school.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think yeah, there are a lot of questions we are very happy to answer here about how the current system works, what are the different pathways, what is a prerequisite for this and all that. But actually, a lot of these rules are shifting. Okay, because at the end of it, after A levels is A levels or after your poly, is you go into uni or the real world already. Okay, and for sure, people are starting to look more and more at what you can actually do lah. Okay, so I would say that no matter which path you take also, one thing I would strongly push for is to start to do more real stuff. I mean, I'm sure Alvin will also agree. Apart from the course giving you more practical experience, in your own time, there are also many opportunities you can pursue. You really don't see that school is the only way to learn. Very, very important. Now today, like you just open up your browser, right? Today, right now you can go and take the courses from Harvard and MIT. There's nothing stopping you already. And this has been true for more than a decade. What is lacking is just people want to go on a track. They want to stick with what everybody else is doing. And maybe they don't have the discipline to do it. But if you do, these have been available for a long, long time.
Yeah.
You wanna take the best intro to computing course in the world. It's available for about $50 from Harvard. They spend $2 million recording that course. Yeah, you get it for free if you don't need a certificate. So I'm just trying to tell you guys that it was true in my generation, right? That time the internet is like starting to get a bit more populated. First time people go and upload stuff on the internet. OpenCourseWare by MIT, all that was a new initiative. It has it has gone crazy over the past decade. So many opportunities.
Yes, and a couple of years ago, you can go and search for it in the news. The Straits Times featured one poly student, okay? This poly student didn't have the best of grades, he didn't have the best, but what he did was something which nobody else did. He started building things. He built 4 or 5 ventures, and he got all the university places. He got from Princeton, he got from Stanford, he got from Yale, solely by virtue of the fact that he appeared to be more entrepreneurial. This was right. It was featured in the Straits Times. Okay? Yeah. So what
Yeah.
Moses is absolutely correct. You need to get your hands dirty. Theoretical, at the end of the day, there needs to be a difference. What makes you a little bit different?
Okay, so, but maybe I throw the hat in the ring a little bit for JC lah, because I mean what Alvin is saying is true. So then the question is then what is JC good for? Okay, so I think useful to know. I think first of all the A level certificate is very well recognized. That is one. Okay, so hard to run away from that. Then the second one is importantly in terms of the skill set. As I mentioned, like this pure math kind of background is very useful. Okay, like just take it from me. Like I mean, Linda, I just now I gave you permission to unmute your mic if you wanted to give a bit more color. Because I'm not trying to give a lot of advice to Linda, but I thought this is a good question to round out everybody's perspectives. That's why I'm spending a bit of time on this. But really a lot of the depending on what you are really interested in. But if you are at all interested in going deeper into these fields, right? I mean, if you guys have been following the papers over the past year, it used to be that the biggest single person contracts were in the NFL, Roger Federer, Tiger Woods before his affair, um, and then maybe some pop stars. And then last year, what happened is the AI researchers, barely mid-20s, but they are doing real work in their universities. There are some undergrads also who are now being signed for $50 million, $100 million salary contracts, guaranteed over the next 3 to 5 years. Right, so if you want to pursue these kind of routes, there are a lot of interesting ones: AI, quantitative finance, very, very interesting industries. I would say this kind of pure math background, you need it if you want to access these kind of industries. Okay, so if that's interesting to you, then you may want to consider continuing that strong pure math education. Okay, so I thought I'd just throw my hat in the ring there. Same thing for stuff like medicine, dentistry as well. Like if you need that chem background, then might as well keep building it now. Okay. Doris was asking, son have A2 for physics, B3 for chem. Is it dangerous to choose? Uh, I think this really depends on your son, you know. Um, okay, what is going through my head? I mean, first, of course, there's the usual stuff that once you practice, a lot of these, they're within your wheelhouse. You're not weak at them, that's for sure. Okay, you're just not uh, extremely perfect at them. Okay, but what I was also thinking of is that there are many people in JC, right? They come in with strong grades, but they also go to E or S if they don't study well, So I would not overthink it, That there is a lot of scope for you to both do very well, and if you are not going to be diligent, then you'll crash and burn anyway. Okay, yeah, that was what I was thinking when I was reading this. Alvin, you wanted to add anything?
No. Okay, and for those of you, right, which is important, and which is why Moses brought in the AI. I just want to bring this back up because in case Moses didn't bring up the whole AI initiative by the civil service, this was actually started and launched by Moses. Okay, for the entire civil service. A couple of years ago, you may not have read it, but Moses was in the papers a couple of times for doing all these things when he was still part of the government. After he finished his president's scholarship on, he came out. So for those of you students who are interested in all these things, to let us know. Okay, I give you all my phone number again. I give you all my phone number. So yeah, because I usually give my students my phone number, so you can contact me if anything at all. Then please remember to join our JC group because there are many interesting things which will be going on over the next couple of months. Okay, so this is my phone number. In case you're not too sure, any questions at all, please feel free. And especially at this critical time when you have make your choice by Monday, please feel free to WhatsApp me. I will make sure that I will respond some way or another. In fact, after this, I'm meeting a couple of parents and students. Yeah. So please make sure you have my number. Then we can explore this. So bear in mind, the building things over here, we also have this opportunities like what we have done for a couple of students. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, Nadia has an interesting question. I don't really want to travel to super elite school. So, I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe there are some of you here who were not here yesterday. So let me just quickly show something. Okay, so I mean, the first thing is that it depends on how much you're going to be traveling, lah. Okay, so I wanted to share a few perspectives. So the first thing is that we made this little tool. I made this little tool, and so I mean, for me, every day now I spend it working with AI, lah. So anybody who wants to talk about AI, who wants to talk about your career, things like that, can also WhatsApp me later. Later, I will share my number in the chat. Just feel free to reach out. Okay. But I think I wanted to share also that we usually, okay, so over here, sorry, we just make it easy for you to search all 17 JC's travel times, both public transport as well as driving. And this is all calibrated for 7:30 a.m. on a usual Monday morning, meaning you reach school at 7:30 a.m., okay, if you need to. Okay, so and that's available at cher.ai, school guide JC cutoff points, okay? And I've also shared our WhatsApp community in the chat. Hi, sorry, can send a number again? Can 9249493? Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so we usually say, don't go out of your way to go to the super elite schools. Okay, but if for folks like Nadia, you have net 2. Okay, this is something that Alvin told me many years ago. Okay, and I now that I have my own kids also, I was also asking him for his refreshed views on this. When do you try to go into what does a super elite school really give you? Okay, because I already said, right, like notes, they're all on Holy Grail. Yeah, if not on Holy Grail, easily found on Carousel. Okay, like anybody who just graduated, you just go on Carousel now, type RI notes. Yeah, you want to buy anything, you can have access to it. Okay, so there's nothing magic there. VJ, all their mathematics and physics YouTube videos, they're on the public YouTube. If you want to go and watch, you can watch. Okay, so is it the curriculum? I don't think so. Is it the teachers? I mean, having been in education and having also gone through the system, there are good and bad teachers everywhere. Okay, like and a superstar teacher may not necessarily be the kind of teacher that has a lot of time to give you personal consult. So I don't think the teachers are really the magic either. Okay, what you may want to consider, Nadia, is that is the community that is there. It's the students you are surrounded by. Okay, so you must ask yourself, are you the kind of student who do you think you will be spurred on by other people competing with you? Okay, and this is something that you must decide for yourself. What Alvin told me, and last time I didn't have the wisdom to know it. That's why I think sometimes it's very useful to have to talk to your parents about it, to also reflect a little bit about it. But what Alvin told me is that he thinks I'm the kind of guy that will be able to stand up to the pressure and become stronger from it. That if I see people, wow, I remember all these weird people I was surrounded with, so all these anomalies, When I was in P5, um, I was lucky enough to get into the GEP. Then P5, the guy next to me, P5, I was reading War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I was reading Harry Potter and I thought it was good already. Then I turned. Then in the corridor, I see somebody reading《三国演义》in Chinese. Not the comic book version, the actual thing that you read from right to left. Then I mean, I was inspired. I thought, wow, if they can do it. But I mean, true enough, I tried to borrow 三国演义 and I still cannot read it. Okay, so in the end, then I tried the comic book version, still cannot read it. Then I tried the Cliff Notes version in Chinese, still cannot read it. Then I went Cliff Notes version in English. Okay, so my Chinese journey was a travesty. But never mind, we talk about that some other time. Okay, but in RI, of course, when I see people who are, wow, they are strong, then I believe that I'm the kind of person that believes, okay, why not I give it a try? It cannot be so out of my reach. Okay, they are the geniuses who I cannot reach, but they are the people who, if they are working hard, I can see that they do well. And if I just talk to them, I understand a bit what they do, I can be better. Right? And I think true enough, when I went through that system, just that healthy pressure around me pushed me to work hard. Yeah. Alvin has his own story as well when he became an ASEAN scholar.
Yeah.
If you want to quickly share.
Yeah, the first day I stepped into RI, so this is the reality, okay? So what RI provided me was the competition. I didn't know what RI was before I came because I was from a kampong school. But because I was an RI scholar, I was literally put into the best class, okay? This was what happened. And the first day I went to RI, there were 20 of us. So 15 of us were in the same class. And this was what happened. We thought it was a welcome tea party, but this was what the principal, and this principal was legendary because it's a fantastic speaker. Okay, by the time I didn't know. So he said, welcome to RI, and we hope that you have a pleasant stay here. That's all there is. End of your welcome. Then he came up with the next statement, which shocked me because I was not used. I was the only guy from a small town. The rest were all from KL, predominantly 90% from all KL. Big competitive schools are from a small town. So he said, let us be under no illusions as to why you're an RI here right now. The government gave you a scholarship for one reason only. You are here to beat the Singaporeans. Your job is to study hard, study harder, and study hardest. If you can't beat the Singaporeans, think about it and use the word, why the hell do we bring you here? And this for me creates the pressure from day one. Okay, because I've never been exposed to such intense. Back in my hometown, this kampong school, I don't need to study hard. Okay, because the syllabus was easy and I don't have much competition. Right now, pressure cooker situation. Okay, it was make or break. Why make or break? Because my parents were not rich. If I don't survive the system, that's it. And after that he continued. So your job is simple: do well in the O levels, beat all the Singaporeans. If you don't beat the Singaporeans, I'm sorry to say that your scholarship journey will end here right now. Or he mentioned he doesn't even need to end after O levels. It can end in Sec 3 if you don't do well in your Sec 3 RI exams. You see, so the pressure starts. So
Yeah.
some of us adapt to the pressure, some of us didn't. This is the reality, but for me, I'm left with no choice. So I had to work my butt out. I'm only naturally good in English, but all the rest, I was super hardworking. Okay, obviously there's a long story behind it, but that was it. Did we, out of the 15 of us, half of us retained our scholarships, half didn't. And let me tell you, in my year, the top 10 students in RI, 8 were ASEAN scholars. It was a mind-boggling year. It was a mind-boggling. I was not in the top 10, but I was good enough to be in top 30. But the top 10, 8 were ASEAN scholars, all from my class. That shows you how strong it was. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so for Nadia, like, I think with a net two, you are basically top 5% of RI already lah.
Yes, I will agree.
Yeah, easily. Okay. I think it's up to you, but at some point of time in your life, I just know, I mean this for the students who are strong, very, very strong. Okay. Uh, at some point of time in your life, must see how you fare uh, amongst other strong people. Okay, it will do wonders for your confidence too. I think like for myself, like I think each phase I go through, whether it's JC, then after that going to the Ivy Leagues, each phase it is challenging. It's really, really there are a lot of bumps. So I mean I can talk a little bit about these study skills that Julia is asking with, but each time because there's challenge, then we have to then we will fail a little bit, then we have to adapt. And then when you do that and you do that successfully, then your confidence grows. And then you start to believe that you can do more and more and more. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that is really very important. And it only happens when you give yourself the chance to fight. Okay. Yeah. So this is what I wanted to share. Just as we talk about, there are many different pathways, but I think for those of you who are especially strong, actually give yourself a shot. Okay. And Nadia, you're not just very strong. You are amongst the strongest in Singapore in your batch. Okay, so if you think you might want to see what the environment is like, actually, you may want to give yourself a shot. Okay, because it's not everybody who gets that opportunity. But on the other hand, so Julia's question, does RI teach you study method or Excel? This one I guarantee you zero.
0.
Okay, zero. Yeah, it is probably a little bit worse than in my time. Yeah, just by virtue of the fact that there's this a bit of less emphasis on the exams now, even more so the teachers are not focusing on study skills. Yeah, and it was one, yeah, if they did, all students would do well. So, I mean, this is something that we can talk a lot about, but I think the important thing is to make sure that you're in our JC chat, okay, on WhatsApp, because this is the part where we will be able to help quite a bit. Yesterday I shared a story. I was not very strong at chemistry. Okay, there was one chemistry paper where I did, because in JC, the papers are 3 hour long. Okay, so if you make a mistake in terms of like study methods or exam techniques, you can really have a disaster. Yeah, and what happened is that one time I was decently okay at chemistry. I was doing section A, doing section B, still doing it in the way I used to do in secondary school. Then the teacher said 5 minutes left. And I turned over the page, and what did I see? I saw section C, 40 marks, and I had 5 minutes. That was the first time I tried my best go through it, but then in the end I got a D, for the exam. But just like what I was saying to Nadia just now, then these are the kind of things where, like Alvin says, I won't run into that if the paper wasn't challenging, and that was an especially challenging paper. Yeah, but after that I started to adapt. I came up with this exam routine that I've used since then. It's very, very simple. It's about reading through the paper. Then I set times for every single page in the paper based on the marks on the paper. And then the moment I pass that time, that means that the exam starts at 9 o'clock. If the first page there's 5 marks, I usually give myself until 9:05. Once I hit 9:05, I skip the rest of the questions and go on already. Okay, and I keep skipping until I can reach the end of the paper. Then that way I make sure I cover the paper. Just with this alone, the next exam, I got top in the level. 70 marks out of 100 for chemistry. The next highest was 45. And after that, they rounded up the scores. I was at 100 and the others were way behind. And so a lot of these things, they're not taught. In terms of studying, even less so, you know. The problem with a lot of the JC notes that you guys will find is that there's just too much content. They try to make it very holistic. They try to give you a lot of the real context, but at the end of it, what you need to actually know for the exam is lost. Okay, so these are things that I think as you guys, we don't want to overwhelm you with information now. So please, any questions you have about, okay, how do I choose between JC and Poly, which courses to take in JC based on the things that I'm interested perhaps to do further on in my life, yeah, please feel free to talk. But once you guys have settled down, you got your subjects, you're starting to get into the groove of it already, we'll be happy to share a lot more. Okay, GP, we know how to do well. Math, we know how to do well. Econs, we have been doing it for many students already. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. Okay, and please join the chat so that we can at least stay in touch. Yeah, but having said that, I mean, Nadia, your question is it okay to go to ACJC? This is ultimately your choice. Okay, but yeah, we will never be able to tell you what you must do. Yeah, we can only lend you some perspectives. And one thing that, yes, very strong students should know is that you got to give yourself a shot at a certain point of life. And maybe it's not at this stage. If you don't feel ready, then make that choice accordingly also. Okay? Yeah.
And this will always be correct, because if you don't give yourself, and this is what I always tell parents and students, at some point in time, we must always be used to some form of
Pressure. Yes.
Would I be where I am today if I didn't come to Singapore downstairs? No, very simple. Because back in Malaysia, I don't need to study. I spend my time reading storybooks, having fun. That's why when I came to Singapore, the reality is that I failed my first maths exam, the last boy in RI, the only boy who failed. Okay? Then I realized that I have to change the way I do it. I got to now, if I'm not so smart compared to my friends, I need to work 3 times harder. So this is my philosophy, right? There will always be people, but I told myself that I cannot be the last boy in RI. It's impossible, right? How can I be? And I was the last boy in RI, the only guy who failed mathematics, 44. The first exam I failed in my life. Very simple, because Malaysia was easy. But 44, average grade in RI for mathematics was 72. This hero here got 44. In my time, it is a red mark. Okay? Right now, you don't have red marks, but in the report book, it becomes a red mark. I wanted to give up. I packed my bags. I wanted to tell my father that I'm going back to become my kampong king because I cannot take the system here. But then I reasoned it out. I didn't even give myself a chance. And I said that this is a rare opportunity for me to stretch myself. I'm a top student. I wasn't just a top student in my town. I was a top student in the state of Johor. Okay? It was easy for me because it was not too intense. And many of my friends don't really study. Yeah, but when I came to RI as the top student in Johor, I was last in class for maths. Then, so you see, everything becomes, then I reasoned to myself, whoa, these guys are maths geniuses, then I really need to up to speed. But because I didn't know second semester, I started drilling. So every day I'm very disciplined. I work on my mathematics for 3 hours. 3 hours without fail. I did every single question. Drill. Because you need to know the concepts, right? There's nothing wrong with exam drills. Within 4 months, I became number 3 in RI, because in those days, RI put in the top 5 students for each subject. Suddenly, my name was on the RI board for mathematics, 98.5% after 4 months. And that was the impetus. So why I say now it became a virtuous cycle. Then in my mind, I said, okay, now I know that even though my friends will be smarter, but if I work harder, I'm going to beat them. For most of them, if my friends are geniuses, top 5 in my class, I can never touch. Why? Because they are at a different level. But that's not my intention. My intention is that I can be better. I definitely cannot be the class. I can definitely be a better version of myself. And just by doing that, it became a virtuous cycle. So once I developed this confidence that I beat the strong students, whom I always thought strong through my study attitude, now I will replicate it for all my subjects.
Yep. Yeah. There's this confidence in yourself.
Yes. So it becomes a virtuous cycle. It can either become a virtuous cycle or what do you call that? virtuous versus,
Vicious.
yeah. So everything is yourselves, but you need that competition, because without the competition, would I be where I am? The answer is no.
Yeah.
I force myself to do a lot of things. I force myself to practice my maths. I force myself to study all the chemistry. I
Yeah.
force myself to do a lot of things. Without the competition back in Malaysia, I don't care what the simultaneous equation is. That's why I failed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So what Alvin said is true. I think one of the big goals of life in general is to see how far you can push your potential. We are all born with a certain nature, and then because of our upbringing, we also have certain skills. You know, and then I think one of the most meaningful things to do with your life is to make sure you live up to your potential. Okay, and I tell this not just to students lah, especially I tell it to a lot of adults, especially those who start to do a bit better, then they get more opportunities, and they're always wondering, hey, wow, there's pressure, there's competition, or there's certain biases against some of these opportunities. I always tell them like the reward for being good is more work lah. You will always get more and more opportunities. It never gets easier for strong people, but it's the goal of life is not easiness. If you want it to be easy, then just go and sleep. Right? Like there's not. You must know. Like just work out the logic. It cannot be that the point of life is easiness. The point of life is to do interesting things. And if you want to do interesting things, I think like being able to compete at the top level is one of the best ways to give yourself a shot to develop that. Okay, this is something to make peace with. And I don't think I had the wisdom when I was younger. I was very, very lucky to have people who pointed me in the right direction before I knew how important these things were. Okay, so that's why we want to do something like this tonight. We don't make any money from this kind of webinars. We are also all the JC stuff. Primarily, a ton of it is going to be free unless we have to spend a lot of time to mark and that kind of stuff. So we just know that a lot of these things we all benefited. Whether it's Alvin, you were talking about the principal. That's Vijay Singer, is it?
Yeah, Richard Singer is
Yeah, exactly.
a
There are just
legend.
these people who, whether they wanted to or not, they pushed us in the right direction. And then really from that point to who we are today, you can really see a straight line. So if any of you learn something new from tonight, I think we also have achieved what we want to do. Okay, and this, of course, not the end of the conversation. But I know it's getting late. We're happy to take questions until 10 o'clock. Yeah, please feel free. And our numbers are also in the chat. Anytime you want to reach out.
So I realized that a number of you were not in the session yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So we also, Weilun, maybe you can tell them the MSA. The MSA, for those of you, because we try to award prizes to as many students as possible. Okay, it's not just the academic. If you think that you deserve something because you did something great, you did something it doesn't need to be great. It can be something which you did which made a difference to you. For instance, you may have always, like last year, we awarded quite a number of prizes to the poly students. Why? They were scoring F9 and P7, whatever, for their various subjects. Then at O levels, they got a B3, some A2, some A1, which I thought was a fantastic achievement. Best progress, whatever. So I think it is very important. So learning, and we always want to give this recognition to all students for a couple of reasons. We all need to be inspired, and you can also see from the other students. And we always use this phrase, right? So that as a community, you grow, you see the good students who are able to develop. And many of our award winners, I'll be very frank, like some of them PSLE, they couldn't really speak. Right now, they're fantastic speakers, right? Everything is a journey. So we want to make that a reality for a number of you. We can even give you scholarships for various things like even for your JC, even for your master speakers, depending on your profile, depending on your confidence level. So please make sure we know you. This is the most important thing. And please make sure you join the JC chat. Okay, so please you submit. So there are a few categories awards. And the reason why we do not make it too exclusive, like only the 8As, 9As, is that we recognize that everything is a journey. And we say this is absolute confidence. So some of you may have been very happy with your results. Some of you may not be too happy. No problem. The minute we go to JC, the minute we go to Poly, we start on a fresh page. Very, very important. Then this fresh page will determine of all the exams, which is probably going to be the most important before you enter the university. It's not your PSLE. PSLE is over sensationalized. people always write a bit about high-stakes exam. How can PSLE be a high-stakes exam? When you got your O-levels, when you got IPA exams, when you got your A-levels, when you got your polytechnic, it's simply not possible. Okay? But make no mistake, the next phase is probably going to be the most important phase of your journey, which is why it's important that you get into our JC chat so that we can give you pointers, we can give you advice. Very, very important, because for a couple of reasons, we have been through this journey. Whatever you've gone through, we have been there. It's not like, we are.
And not just the school part, because you need to have the context of what is happening in
Yes,
society as well. Very
yes,
important.
very important. And we are not
Yeah.
just teachers. This is the most important thing. We are in the community, we are in the business, and all of us have different experience. We are not teachers just from school. We all started out as professionals in our different domains. And that gives you an entirely different domain. And this is the reality, right? Most teachers will not be able to say what we say because our experiences are different. They may be great at teaching, but we're also great at teaching. But we have other perspectives which not all would have. That's why we really encourage you to join. And please make sure we know you. So your 5As, 6As, 7As, we all have category surprises. Then we got the best progress, we got the special prizes, depending on your ability. If you think that you are an aspiring singer, you got some talent,
Yeah.
or you are a CCA leader, you want a Commonwealth essay writing contest, it doesn't matter whether you want, you regard as an achievement, please nominate yourself. Very important. There's no right or wrong. Okay, and every year we have 700. We try to give as many as possible. So we have 700 awardees at all levels. Okay, whether it's GP, whether it's PSLE, whether it's IP, whether it's O level. So we try to give as many. So please make sure you do not miss out. Okay, very, very important. Then along the way you learn, then we will ask you to come. Then maybe we can even teach you how to speak better, especially when you need to inspire the students. Okay,
Yeah.
and nothing comes from free. How I trained Moses was I got him involved in all the seminars when he was in primary school.
Yep.
Everything starts. You see, now our most fantastic speaker, he sits in every one of our seminar, and he's only he's in JC1 this year, because he makes it a point to learn, and the more he speaks, the better he becomes. There are no two shots. So some of you in future, we may ask you, or if to come and share. That's how you grow. That's how you learn to see, and that's what we hear. There are no two ways about doing it. Okay, the more you do it, the better you become. The top
Yeah, I
speaker,
mean,
yeah,
it's because a lot of this is not rocket science, lah. But we find that the students who benefit the most, they take the simple ideas seriously. I mean, I believe in this so much that this is also one of my life mottos. Take a simple idea seriously. When we say communication is important, after you talk to your parents, you make up your mind that it is important, you got to invest in it. Yeah. When we say, okay, try and do more real stuff in JC, a lot of you may treat it as a 边锋, but it is the difference between 2 years that you enjoy and that really pay off for you in terms of where you want to go and what you want to do with your life, and something where you just feel that no matter what, you can't seem to make headway and you're competing with a lot of other students, you're thinking about the politics between students, all these smaller things when there's so much opportunity out there. Okay. And like Alvin said, uh, as long as your academics are decent, then we're happy to. We'll also be very, very realistic. Okay, we will not try to stretch you too much if your academics are very weak, because at the end of the day, you still need to get these things. You need to get your foundation strong. Okay, so but for students and many of you here that we can see, for those of you who are going to be quite okay with your foundations, actually there's many opportunities. So that student that Alvin was talking about, right now I'm working with him to show him how to do product development, how to conceptualize a product, actually start to execute, and you start to realize, wow, even if you're a strong student, if you're a national debater, some of these skill sets are totally foreign and you have to learn. But it's so useful to start early, because then there's so many opportunities, and this is the best time in your life to go and learn. You don't have responsibilities, you don't have kids, you don't even have to think about a job yet. You can actually go and learn. Okay. Yeah. So let's stay in touch. You guys have me and Alvin's numbers. You also have the general chat where we will send out whether some of these are more ad hoc kind of events or just talks, depending on where we are in the year, depending on the things that we're hearing from you in our DMs as well. We'll be happy to host quite a number of this. So please stay in touch if you found this useful. Okay.
yeah. And thank you. One last point, right? And many of you would have seen Weilun last year, right? Because he was the lead teacher, he was actually our academic director, very, very strong student. So I'm sure he has inspired all of you as well. So keep the information coming. And I would like to thank Weilun for leading this seminar again. He has been leading seminar for the last couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Alvin and Moses, and thanks for all the students and parents for joining in tonight. So as mentioned, I think definitely this will be an ongoing journey lah, and definitely join our WhatsApp group where we will also look at any other queries, any questions that you have, and we'll be happy to also take it from there. For those of you who are also interested in like the poly pathway, actually tomorrow we'll have another session in the morning on the poly pathway. So any other questions that you all have, also feel free to join in, and then we can take it from there too, right? Okay. And with that, yeah, I think that's the key part, okay, for tonight. Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining in, and all the best for the JAE, right, and your school choices, right? So with that, good night for everyone, and have a good weekend, right? See you.
Yep. Take care,
Yeah, see
everybody.
everyone.
All the best.